Hilarious.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
How's everybody doing this evening? Could you guys hear that music, by the way, out there? I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to get this figured out with my board here. For some reason, it just updated, and I don't know if you guys can hear that movie, and that's why I was doing this. Yeah, that's why I was doing this. Anyway, it's great to see everybody. So, what a fantastic Sunday this has been, and it's going to get even better. We want to thank you for being here on the interview room. And of course, if this is your very first time here with us, we welcome you and we thank you for being here. We ask just one thing, and that you hit the subscribe button. And then, of course, if you would hit the thumbs up and send it to everybody in the world, that would be absolutely amazing, because what you're going to learn is we have the best chat. We have the greatest mods, Miss Sophia, Teresa M, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, and of course, Laura Wally. We are so blessed to have these women in our chat. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here, each and every one of you. And if you've never met this guy over here, this is Dr. Gary Brucato. He's a forensic psychologist and the author of The New Evil. If you have not, by the way, this is #1 on Amazon in forensic psychology. So get out there, get this book, and he's working on a couple of more that are even going to be, they're going to be sisters and cousins and maybe uncles to this next. You've seen him all over the world. He's always on TV. He was on the Dateline special. He was all over the place. And and tonight I'm going to show you why he was. Just a piece of why he is who he is. Gary, welcome.
How are you?
I'm fired up tonight. I'm excited. I'm really excited. But Buddy had a great day. Karen had a great day. I had a great day. God was good to us today, like every day. But I also, feel kind of a little liberated that, the stuff that came out most recently about, the photographs and et cetera, et cetera. And tonight, I want to talk about why the obsession with serial killers, the obsession with, you told me behind the scenes that, what was his name? Rawling would be a player in this. You also said Ed Kemper, and come to find out, those are also other individuals, which we kind of knew based on what your profile was, would be individuals that would be influential in Bryan's life.
Well, and Burgess talked on your show about having sent someone in to talk to Kemper about about who it might be we were looking for, that
That's
law
right.
enforcement was looking for. But one thing I do want to squeeze in before we launch in, because I always think it's important to put the emphasis on the victims, is
Yes.
that one thing I found myself thinking about was that yesterday would have been the 20th birthday of Kaylee Anthony. And I don't know why that just sort of got stuck in my head, but just think about that. I mean, she wouldn't have even been a kid anymore. Yesterday. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing.
And the idea of getting cheated out of life like that and all that, and of course we want to dedicate the episode always to the victims of the Idaho case, and in that kind of ripple effect to all of the people that love them, who are affected, who were victimized, who were, and there's also the other kind of victim that no one ever seems to remember, is all the people in the world who have themselves been assaulted, who are activated every single time there's a case in the news, or someone gets away with something or gets special treatment in court. They feel like it's their own attacker all over again, kind of getting away with it or something like that. So I just want to put that out there because of our work with the Cold Case Foundation, just how important that is. I'm sure you would echo, Chris, the
100%.
Before we even get into any of this. And I want to say before we launch into this, that part of what is so disturbing about this kind of not getting a clear picture of what the heck happened in this case is that it hurts the victims' families who need closure. I mean, wouldn't you say, Chris?
100%. And what's happened, how things have kind of, dripped out, for lack of a better term. I wanted to go on the record, and I'm still going to go on the record. I mean, I'm not saying that. Look, you know me, Gary.
Oh, yeah.
You know me
Very
like
well.
a book. Okay, I do not like. Well, I am a straight shooter, and it feels uncomfortable to say, you know what? I found that stupid glove. I don't know if it's the right glove. I don't know. I found a glove. I'm sorry. I wish that they would have found that glove. Okay. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I don't like the fact that we said long before we did the profile analysis with Ann, with you, Greg, Dean, myself, and you nailed Bryan Kohberger before they even caught him. And now I have to use his name tonight so that folks are clear that we are talking specifically about that animal. But at the same time, in that analysis, we have professionals like Greg, like yourself, who said, look, these are the things they're going to be looking for at the BAU. These are the things they're going to be talking about. And post homicide now, you have a DA who says, well, we don't know what the motive is. We have no working theory. At least they won't discuss it now. And they're still not discussing it. And even though the information that was leaked to Dateline, i.e. the Ted Bundy stuff, the girls in the bikinis, all of this other stuff, okay, we were talking about this before Dateline, before anybody, and we were saying to them, okay, I remember the day the BAU was there, the Behavior Analysis Unit, and they were looking through the windows, and it's all over the news, and I was going, well, okay, they're going to give them a behavioral assessment. And then to hear them say and look at each other, well, we weren't even considering that this could have been a serial killer, or even that this was a serial killer in the making. And even today, this very day, they still are telling the public, well, we don't know. And what's the most glaring is that one conversation in CNN where the reporter looks over at Idaho State Police and says, well, what exactly was on his phone? And how does he answer it? He tells the world, well, we know he was following the investigation. And she's like, and I kind of mocked him the other day. I was like, do you hear the ice cream truck going by? Anybody hear the ice cream truck? And my wife is going nuts, who, is a PIO, an investigative journalist, going, look, that's not how you feed the beast. Meaning the media, the mainstream media. You've got to tell it just the way it is. Because what ends up happening, unfortunately, is stuff like this. And this is Fox News, where they have finally decided that, yes, in fact, Kohberger did use his cell phone to search for serial murderer Ted Bundy, and also for pornography, searching for terms sleeping, passed out, and drugged. All that is pretty accurate. This is ISP. This is his words. These are his words.
Right. And as I said on the Dateline episode, it's true that people who are studying crime could be looking up Ted Bundy. The difference is, as someone who does look up serial killers because I write about them and I study them, and as I'm sure you do too in your work, the difference is that you're not also getting pulled into watching P that has themes that are of the same type as the serial killer that you appear to be most interested in. And in addition, you're not cosplaying as the offender minutes after downloading material on them, so that you start getting the sense of identifying with the offender, not just being interested in them. And you also see interesting parallels between the offenders that he was interested in and the actual offense. Simple example, we know now that there was an interest in rolling. Well, rolling had come to my mind as a possibility, not only because of the sorority style, sorority house style attack, but because of the use of a K-bar style knife. Well, this made me think that he was sort of imitating a whole bunch of offenders, but had a special place in his heart, apparently, for Bundy. And, and people that favored blades and other bludgeons and other kinds of things. So it's interesting to think about that. Now, Chris, the problem is that one could take the perspective that there's a downplaying or whatever. And another way to see it is that they may just not understand that these things are classic indicators of somebody who is more of a serial killer. So I think, just for the sake of the audience, I want to just explain something quickly, if that's okay. Is that all right? Or am I derailing us?
No, okay. No. Go ahead.
So, I'm a derailer. What can I say? Okay. So
you've been known.
Okay. I've been known to do it. So, but there's always a method to my madness. So you want to understand that motives for homicide, when they are more traditional, not of a serial nature, fall into just a few buckets, right? You have the rare case of the person who is psychiatrically disturbed or using drugs and just sort of does something out of the ordinary and bizarre, right? You have the individual who has a particular gripe and in an isolated way commits murder and probably will never do it again. They're being traumatized. They have to escape a difficult situation and feel that's the only way out. They're jealous. They're whatever. But the point is, it's impetuous kind of a. Then you have the type with a motive like that who more meticulously plots it, but is motivated in the same way. I'm going to get revenge against so-and-so. So-and-so cheated, on me, whatever. Then you get the type that's an elimination murder, a term I've coined, right? Where somebody is just in the way and you want them out of the way for practical reason. Where there's a whiff of personality disorder or full-blown personality disorder. What you don't get in those buckets of isolated murder is a person who is purely driven by fantasy. The minute fantasy, whether it's overtly sexual or has just undertones of sex to it, comes into the picture, the person is going to keep doing it because they have to perfect the fantasy over time. And the clue, the biggest clue you get to that, well, there's two. One, and both of them are true of Kohberger. One is you start to see that they were feeding the fantasy in some way before they went out and actually did it. And that's usually the viewing of P, right, of some form. And we know that in this particular guy's case, he was looking, and now it's confirmed, right, was viewing that sort of thing related to people that are completely helpless, sleeping, drugged, forced, knocked out, whatever, which has a Bundy-like quality to it because Bundy was a necrophile and would bludgeon victims and so forth. We always think of Bundy as bopping victims on the head to incapacitate them, to take them somewhere to do what he was going to do to them. But remember that he would have probably also been bludgeoning the person repeatedly during the offense because he was turned on by the person looking dead, being completely knocked out and helpless. It wasn't only to incapacitate, I think, but also liking the person. In fact, Bundy would make one of his romantic partners pretend to be dead in the bedroom because he was aroused by it. Now, there's that. The other clue you get is that the fantasy precedes actually having a victim for the first time, and the victim is a stranger to you. What we have in the Kohberger case is that he buys the blade like 8 months before the killing. And they kept emphasizing that everyone keeps saying, we found no link at all between him and the victim. Okay, so we already can take off the table being motivated by some personal thing.
But we do know there is a link now.
Okay, I want to talk, but it's probably not going to be this particular person hurt me. It's more like you're a symbol of whoever hurt me. And now I went out and I found someone who looks the part. Now, what I've called that in the literature, I call that the prototype. The prototype is the original source, and then you go out and you project it onto the victim. I have no doubt, as we're beginning to understand this guy's history, that he was somebody who, was viewed himself as kind of bullied and had a hard time figuring out what would make him liked by the world and was increasingly alone and all of that. But it's very clear that at some point he started divvying up the world into two types of women, right? The women that, like, for example, the way that he had no issue with his professor. He had a female attorney. He had a mom that he may have had a kind of a certain respect for. So he seemed to have that type of woman. And then there's the young, around his age female that he has this kind of collective anger toward, that he feels like they rejected him or were beautiful and disinterested him or whatever. And those kind of women, he seemed to think they shouldn't be getting educated. They shouldn't be going to school. They should be graded more harshly. What are they doing in this business? Whatever. That kind of collective rage towards a group where you go out and you find someone who emblematizes the group is also very typical of a serial offender, because the whole point is you're going to keep doing it to keep expressing that rage more perfectly. And so when you put all these facts together, you start understanding that this is a guy that if he hadn't been caught would have probably been trolling for someone else because it wouldn't have completely fulfilled the fantasy. I think there are things he wanted to get around to do. So I wanted to give that sort of mini disquisition, about types of murder, because when people are saying, what's the motive? Through process of elimination, it has to be fantasy driven. And if you're going to make a bet, most fantasy driven murder is sexualized, whether it's very overt or there's a whiff of it, like Son of Sam, another offender this guy was looking up, according to what was on the screen in the Dateline episode. Son of Sam did not overtly assault victims, but he would get aroused by setting fires, for example, and that would prompt self-pleasuring and things like that. So there's a sort of whiffs of it. And I think, Chris, from the beginning, what we said in the profile, which we'll revisit, was that it might not be overt, but there are whiffs of it even in the choice of weapon and the fact that these are young female victims and they're assaulted in the bed and all this kind of. So, but Chris, I just wanted to put that out there because it's very weird to me that you have people who have expertise in this stuff who could say even before there was an arrest that that's the kind of person you were looking for. And to this day, there is an effort to downplay it now, or fight the. Now, the other thing I finally have to say before we proceed is I want to correct the record on something. I've been getting a lot of messages from people who say, the prosecutor said there was nothing sexual. They said there was nothing serial killer here. Okay, now let me correct this for these people. What they said, essentially, was that nothing sexual happened. Not that nothing sexual was intended. They also do not seem to understand that something can be sexual without there being a traditional physicality to it. There are forms of sexuality that are fantasy-based, particularly in inadequate, weird people, that we have to understand, that sex is a lot larger than just that. The second thing is, to say there's nothing serial about it means we don't know that this guy killed anybody before. We don't think so either, right? We don't know that he was planning to go out and kill anyone else. Yeah, that doesn't mean he doesn't have the motives of somebody who might have. So I want to put that out there, because what you get is people who are telling the public this as if we're incorrect in what we've said, and it comes from not having any idea about the work we do. See what I'm saying? So
Yep.
Let's just put that out there. Now, do you agree with everything I'm saying there, or do you want to
1,000%? And
right.
And I'm going to drive that point home, because if we think about what when we, by the way, it was December 21st, 2022, when everybody was on the panel and you gave your assessment. Okay. So that was a long time ago.
A long time ago.
And in that time, the behavior science unit came after that time. And I just want to point one thing out, that we had Greg on the panel as well. And Greg, here's Greg's line here. It says,
the former head of behavioral science.
He ran the behavior science. Here's a line in Greg's bio. While assigned to the FBI Academy and Critical Incident Response Group, he served in several positions within the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime. He was also manager of the Violent Crime Apprehension Program, VICAP. He then became acting unit chief of the Behavioral Profiling Unit and was also an FBI National Academy instructor on criminal psychology, criminal investigative analysis, and analytical aspects of criminal behavior. So why do I show this? Because we had on the panel, the one of the guys, like Ann, Greg ran the BAU. And so people that showed up that day, if they were around when Greg was around, they would have gone to his class. And he laid out his opinions. You laid out your opinion and laid out her opinions. And everybody had the same opinion, that there's something more behind the scenes. And when we saw stuff like this, all this P stuff, this inappropriate material, it's all pretty, and then they've admitted, yes, it was accurate. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It was accurate. There were searches P, but it wasn't extensive. And he goes to put in there, well, why is that? Because he says there was not anything that led us to believe, okay, he had some type of sexual desire behavior that's driving this. The line above says sleeping, passed out, drugged. He forgot to say gagged, okay, because that's also on his phone in the Cellebrite dump. But we also know he deleted and wiped a lot of his devices. So what he's saying is he's downplaying it, but then he says, but we also know he deleted his devices. Okay. And so obviously we don't know what he wiped or wasn't there. Why don't you just tell the public, look, this guy had a lot of very inappropriate material on his phone. Some of it was so drastic that it was consistent with the type of behavior you would see in a sexual sadistic situation. Now, is that the motive? We don't know. That's all he had to say. Okay. However, it is indicative of a motive in this type of situation.
Well, it's a little disturbing to suggest, and I'm not talking about this particular person who said it. I just think if anyone said that you could just explain it away as being something the average person would view, the truth of the matter is I find that disturbing. I don't think that the average male, now look, there are a lot of men who look at P, okay? But they don't look at P in which a woman is being essayed, drugged, gagged, forced, whatever. And I just think that to suggest that, I don't know. I don't know who people are talking to, but I have to tell you, I mean, but as far as watching P with traditional commonplace kind of sexual acts, yes, I think there are a lot of average people out there who do that. That's why it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But that particular type, it caters to a very particular fantasy. Also, I can tell you, as somebody who talks to offenders, one of the reasons that you look for people that are knocked out or drugged is if you're a necrophile and you're interested in people that are dead, but you can't look that stuff up. So you get a proxy. You look for people that are sleeping or knocked out or whatever, because what you're interested in is complete control over a person, like they're a puppet or a marionette. It's a where you can experiment and do whatever you want to do, like a, you know, like somebody who's getting intellectually stimulated by just doing something with a person who cannot fight back or reject you. And that kind of relationship, you know, that somebody wants that kind of relationship is interesting in and of itself. I'm sure that that kind of P gives a person a sense of power and control and domination and so forth, and expresses anger. But I don't think that it's common. I don't think the average person is looking that up. No, I don't. And do you, Chris?
No.
We've dealt with offenders that look at that stuff, but
all the time. And that's what was so disturbing when they downplayed it, because that in of itself told us a whole bunch about where they wanted to go post homicide now, because now they're not telling the public that, look, they're trying to now. They're trying to, but when all of these document dumps start happening, and I had one of our members send me this particular article here about from the Independent. Now these are the individuals from Cellebrite, and I've said it from the beginning. Once that Cellebrite report drops, everybody's going to go, holy cow. And Gary, we're going to play your profile next, because
it's long. You'd have to play it for a long time. You mean snippets of it, I hope.
I got snippets of it. I got 15 minutes of it. Snippet.
Dear Lord. Well, okay. Well, we could talk about what was right and wrong in it.
Okay, but in this particular article now, they're clearly saying, remember, for the longest time they're saying that no, there's no connection. We couldn't find one thing, you know, that connected these victims to Bryan Kohberger. Yet we know now that there is a connection to the restaurant. He was using their Wi-Fi at the restaurant.
Oh.
And
but remember, Chris, another one of the there was no ... statements that the prosecution made was that there was no stalking.
Right here. His phone had joined the Wi-Fi at the restaurant two of the victims worked at. How can you say there's no connection when you had a Cellebrite report telling you there was a connection at that restaurant?
That's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, I said that's interesting that this is coming out, that because even when you're trolling and you're looking for just a random person, there must be a point of connection, but that's a kind of stalking behavior, and they went out of their way to say there was no stalking. Remember that?
Yep.
Well, of course that makes no sense, because you have to figure out where the person lives and how to gain access, and you visit their house 23 times. What is that if it isn't stalking? You know what I'm saying? That's like saying it has pointy ears and it's furry and it has a long tail and it has paws and it eats cat food, but we can't really say what it is. All right, well, use your imagination. it's kind of stalking, but I guess it didn't meet a legal definition.
Well, and everything was downplay, 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 downplay. And I knew this was going to be damaging, and any other YouTuber out there, and I know there are many that watch us. Okay, we've got almost 3,000 people in here just tonight. If you're out there, get the Cellebrite report.
Yeah.
Get the Cellebrite report. You will see the photographs. You will see this information. This is from theindependent.com. I'll make sure that we put the link below today. I forgot to do it so far, but I'll make sure that we get it in there. In fact, I'll put it into chat right now. Hang on for a minute.
So wait, while you're doing that, Chris, let me understand.
Yeah.
You're saying that at the Mad Greek, he was using their Wi-Fi.
Yeah, he there's the link right there, guys. Yes. And not only that, look what they're reporting. And by the way, I know some of these people personally at Cellebrite. And that's why I was dead set. Once that report comes out, unfortunately, it's going to look really bad. Now, look what else they found out. Details of what the team found, including scrub files. So they found the scrub files. Private browsing, VPN activity, and obsessive downloads other than serial killers were found hidden deep in his phone, not in a visible gallery or standard folder, but in a buried file directory that requires forensics tools to uncover. Why is that important?
Because a student who was looking at it only for that reason wouldn't have to hide it.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's saying it was like serial killer information.
Well, it's going to get better. Okay, because look at the next sentence. He had downloaded reports on the Idaho murders and extensive searches of his victims. Ladies and gentlemen, either these people are not telling it the way it is, or somebody else is trying to hide what they already knew, and they're downplaying it. Again, I go back to the bullet points of the University of Idaho. I blame them. I'm not going to beat around the bush. When Barrett met with them in his report, the very first day, within a couple of hours, they circled the wagons. And they should have never let a civilian agency, i.e. a university, in the circle in this quadruple homicide. The reason is they did not know that day if somebody in that university was their killer, or somebody in that office that they were meeting with could have been the killer. And so that was an oversight. It was a mistake. I'm not going to beat around the bush. That's the truth. It was the same. It was equal to using that exit as a point of entry with that crime scene log that I showed a couple of, recently. Those are the kind of things when you walk up and you go, hey, that's a glove. Hey, why are these cars sitting here? Hey, why are you meeting with the university? Hey, why are you downplaying all of this? There's a common denominator. You know what it is. And this is my opinion. It's not Gary's opinion. This is my opinion. It's the University of Idaho. That's the common denominator. And so that tells me, wait a minute. When you go out and you tell the public, he also had downloaded reports of the Idaho murders and extensive searches of his victims, and then you tell CNN, well, he was following the investigation. Okay, fine. Guess what? You knew that because he up here, he says it right here. Where is it? Back here. Okay. He had cleaned his devices, but you didn't tell us the other part. The other part is they were able to pull those scrub files. They were able to point out, okay, and here Cellebrite's being great and is patting everybody on the back, okay, but up here, you didn't tell us about the connection to the restaurant. That he was going to that restaurant and was connecting to their Wi-Fi where two of the victims were. In fact, Thompson came out to the world and said, well, there is no connection to the victims that we could find. Really? Well, when this Cellebrite report comes out, and those of you that don't know how to read it, I'll break it down for you. You're going to have to download some software, and it's free. You can get it on Cellebrite.com. And by the way, you know who this company is. Remember the shooting in San Bernardino, and they couldn't get into the suspect's phone. Cellebrite's the company that broke the password and got in for the government. Okay, so no smoking gun. Okay, that goes back to this principle. Well, he had some problem here, but we're not sure what it was related to. So nothing to see here. Move along. All right, so I'm going to jump over to this conversation, Gary.
Oh,
the whole reason here. All right, tell the audience why I have this picture up here.
One of the things that people who've seen me on your program and elsewhere know is that I have tried to make an educated guess of what the book is that Bundy, that Kohberger, Freudian slip, that Kohberger had that was marked on page 118. And I made an educated guess that that book was going to be about Bundy. I made that guess based on some things we've talked about previously before the Dateline episode, before we found out Bundy was on the phone and so forth. I was absolutely convinced that it was a Bundy book. So what I did was I got hold of all the books in my own collection or in bookstores, whatever, about Bundy. And I said, which are the ones that are commercially available that would be easy to, because we don't know of him having gone on Amazon and buying a Bundy book or something like that, right? So I wanted to know what Bundy books were widely available, and there were a couple. And then I went and I looked at page 118 of each of them, and I became convinced that this book, this Michaud book, the one that was the basis of the Netflix thing, I became convinced that that is the book that was marked on page 118. Now, I want to emphasize, because people are saying, oh, it wasn't the Elliot Rodger thing. No. As a matter of fact, as I've said 100 times, the Elliot Rodger Manifesto is not published in a book form like this that you go to the store and own. And also, let's face it, the Elliot Rodger thing has been sort of blown away as not really having any grounding, just as we said was going to be the case. And Bundy. Now, if you enlarge this page, Chris, can you? And I want to emphasize, there are different editions of this book, but I think this was the edition. This one, page 118, interests me. But can you read it? Because it's so tiny that I can't see the text.
Yeah, but then I'm going to, yes, it's Ted TB. It's a popular theory, but I think it's also important. I got to lay the foundation. You were also saying that you believe that he had a duality concept.
Oh yeah. But I was gonna explain that once you read this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because there's a reason I think this is the book.
Right.
But I don't know it for sure, and I could be wrong, and I'll be happy to eat crow if I'm wrong, but I really think this is it. So, if you make it large enough that I could read it, I'll read it. Because I want to comment on it as I go.
Can you see that?
No. You want to send me a link to the image, and I can read it off my phone or something?
Can you see that?
Slightly larger, and I'll probably be able to.
Okay, stand by. Okay, everybody, this is what we've been waiting for. How about that?
Okay. Now scroll to the top of the page.
Okay, it won't let me scroll, so we're going to have to do it in pieces.
And on the left side, you got page 118 here.
Yeah, this is page 118 right here. I can read it, Gary.
So go ahead, read it from the top. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read it. All right, stand by. I'm doing 10 things all at the same time. You should see me drive and juggle. Okay. TB, astonishing how virtually anonymous people have been linked with more murders than Son of Sam, or even John Gacy, which is not. Gacy never got in a position where he could become publicized. They caught him, convicted him, and put him away with a minimum of flurry, as I recall. It wasn't like chasing a killer across several states. SM, you talked at some length about the abnormal entity took over with increasing regularity, forming a sort of partnership with the more normal part of him, the part that had to deal with day-to-day activities. And I guess the enthusiasm to be very active during the period was a way of protecting the others. TB. Concealing is a better word. I didn't want to overwork the simple analogies, but because a man becomes an excellent tennis player doesn't mean he cannot go out and do his business or become absorbed in tennis, parachuting, or whatever. It may be a terrible, important part of himself. Using a slightly different analogy, homosexuals, at least in the past, concealed a certain part of their lives. They didn't bring the activity and those desires into the business place so they could function.
Okay. Bingo.
Okay.
Now, I think the reason I think this is it is because what we have said for a long time is that the essence of Kohberger is the double life. The person who is like Bundy, masquerading as a future pro-social individual, learning in school how to battle crime and reduce, I'm here to help, right? I'm here to help. While by night, nursing a perverse, angry fantasy. And what the essence is of what he's saying there is that the person with the double life can pull off going out in the world and showing a different side of the self while having this other side. Now, in order to understand this, we have to understand there are two different constructs described by serial killers or offenders that are fantasy motivated or personality motivated. One is the dissociative, compartmentalized individual who doesn't necessarily see the fragmentation in the self. The person who can live this totally split existence, but is sort of slipping in and out of these different parts of the self without as much conscious awareness. But then there's the type that does what BTK called cubing, where there's an intentional, manipulative showing of a part of yourself while getting aroused that you're fooling people, that you've got this whole other double life, that kind of dark side of you that's living inside of you that you consider embarrassing or shameful. Now, the fact that Bundy is making a comparison there with gay people living in a time when it would have been acceptable also has the quality of suggesting there's a sexual element to this, and it has to be kind of kept in the closet because it's embarrassing or shameful or forbidden or whatever. So I've got to live a double life, but I'm satisfying this need privately. Now, I, of course, want to emphasize that in quoting Bundy here, I am by no means suggesting that there's anything wrong with individuals who identify that way. I refuse to. They're tortured enough as it is by the world. What I think is that this individual was identifying with Bundy, who was identifying with individuals who feel they have to keep a part of themselves locked away in the darkness that has something to do with perverse fantasies. That's how it would have been seen by Bundy, and Kohberger seems to have identified with it. Now, I got to tell you, if that's the book marked on page 118, then what it tells us is that this guy was not one of these people who was completely clueless, had to go around fooling people and whatever. That he was very good at keeping a part of himself tucked away, and knew that he was fooling people, which is very different than the picture of the kind of weird guy who doesn't realize how strange he is and whatever. It suggests somebody who knew how to manipulate people, and that takes a little empathy, and that's very different than the depiction of him, right? It takes a little empathy that you take advantage of. You read people, you read the room, so that's interesting to think about that. But I don't think he did it as well as Bundy. I think he would have fantasized to be Bundy, but in the end, he can only do it a little bit But then the weird came out, especially when this guy would get angry or was under pressure, he would lose it. The double life would collapse and it would explode out. And you would suddenly see the darkness of him. Bundy, for the most part, could conceal it and was a master of concealment. But then when he was with his victim, out it would come. Or when he was being aroused in a sexual situation with a partner. For example, we know there was one romantic partner Bundy had when he was younger that he would enjoy. He would enjoy dunking her head under the lake to watch the little air bubbles because he was getting aroused by his fixation even then. So that he couldn't hide that. See, but I have to tell you, Chris, I really think that's going to be the book. And
I agree.
Could he have been studying that just because he was a criminology student? Yeah, but as far as we know, that book was not assigned to him when he was at school. We have no reason to believe that was study. And it goes beyond just having a book about Bundy and underlying something in it, because we have images on his phone, lots of pictures of Bundy, and dressing up as him and being interested in similar porn, and also becoming angry at women and having very particular fantasies about doing things to women that collectively suggests some over-identification with serial killers of the Bundy type or offenders of the Bundy type. Now, as I said, it would have to be that edition because the previous edition, page 118, is different. But this is the one that I'm pretty convinced about. Now, tell me what your thoughts are on this, about this idea of this dark thing living in you and the fragmentation and all of this.
Well, I think everything that we have talked about, that I'm going to put money on it that at some point this has played into the equation here. I also have some other stuff. I got to pull it up, but it's a good segue into what we were talking about, what you were talking about when it comes down to the profile. And I want to remind everybody just real fast. So this was December 21st, 2022, everybody. Okay. This was before, it was 9 days before they arrested Bryan Kohberger. Okay. The BAU had already been there. We have Greg in the upper left-hand corner, Dr. Ann Burgess in the middle, Gary's on the right. I don't know who that pretzel boy is on the bottom left. And then Dean, the bottom right. Listen very carefully what the assessment was about who the suspect would be.
Well, try to do this briefly because there are really a lot of things to say about this.
Is that playing?
And I think it is very important.
You can hear it?
That we emphasize that we're operating.
Can everybody hear that? Because I'm not
without
hearing
autopsy photos and a lot of other surveillance, camera, images and all kinds of other things.
Everybody hearing that?
Here.
My voice sounds deeper, though. I sound like a kind of echoey Orson Welles or something, but
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, hang on for a minute.
I don't look like Orson Welles a little bit there, too.
No, it's going to be a setting. So hang on. Sorry.
All's Wells that ends well.
Well, I just had an update on my my board here. No, literally not more than 20 minutes ago. So I'm wondering if I didn't click something.
And what an honor it was, Chris. I remember that moment because here are people that have been heroes of mine, right, for years, sitting there listening to this, blabbing on I'm doing, and it was such an honor. I mean, that I was contributing something to these people that I've always lionized. It really was a wonderful moment.
Okay, hang on. Well, keep talking because I've got to fix this. I got to re-upload it. Okay?
I wonder if we're ever going to find out for sure about the book.
You'll find out.
I hope so, but I really think that's going to be it. I could be wrong, but I looked at the other ones. I looked at the Stranger Beside Me. I looked at the Liz book. I looked at, and I also looked at other things. People had suggested for some time that it was my book. And page 118, interestingly, would place him right. into the category where I would put Kohberger. So I thought that was interesting, but I really don't think so. I think it's a Bundy book. I think there's a special interest in him. Somebody asked in the audience, somebody asked an interesting question while you're pulling that up. And the question was, let me just see if I can find it. It was like one of those highlighted ones. Let me see. The one about, what do you think about him grooming the dog? That's an interesting question, Chris. So maybe while you're pulling that up, I could comment on that. Is that okay? To address the question? Or do you plan to get to that later in the video?
No, I wasn't going to talk about it, but there is a picture of Murphy underneath the desk in some of the photographs that have been released. I'm trying to figure out why this isn't working, so forgive me, guys. Let me see if it's working now.
Okay.
But that having been,
yeah, that's fine. It sounds fine. I just sound sort of, you know, I have a deeper voice or something, but that's okay. Who cares?
Well, what's interesting is I can't hear it through my.
I hear it perfectly.
I think it's important to point out that what we're dealing with here, by any definition, whether it be the FBI crime classification manual definition or the less conservative definition one sees in the literature on mass murder, we're dealing with a mass murderer here. This is somebody who killed 4 victims at one time in one location. We have no reason to believe yet that this is somebody who went on to kill again, killed in close proximity in time to the offense, killed before with any kind of cooling off period. Now, I can tell you, I was the lead author on, along with Dr. Raghi Gurgis, we co-created the Columbia Mass Murder Database during my time at Columbia Medical Center. That's, to my knowledge, the largest study done to date of mass murder worldwide. And I think it gives a little bit of information that might be helpful here. What we found is that what really matters is the weapon. And the fact that we're dealing with
stop me at any time, Gary, because I can't hear it very well.
Other than a gun is very critical.
Tell me when you want to stop.
Turns out from that very large data set that when we're looking at the use of a weapon other than a gun, the likelihood that we're dealing with somebody who has some odd characteristics that might be considered to be on the spectrum of being authentically disturbed is greatly increased, significantly increased. However, there is also a subset of people who use weapons other than guns that do so because they have a lot of the psychopathic characteristics like we see in people that are more likely to be serial offenders. Now, I will say that about 11.78% of the people in our database did in fact turn out to commit mass murder as part of a wider pattern of serial killing, but we don't know yet what's going to go on here. Now, my guess based on the data is that this is a person that I do believe is male. 97% of mass murderers are male, we found. I do not believe that this is somebody who operated with another person, because I think by definition, this is an odd person who would have difficulty establishing relationships. I imagine this to be a person who would live a very restricted, mechanical existence with a temper, a little bit of a paranoid quality that you would stay away from because you would sense that they were peculiar and that they were a little hot-headed, and a person that could really hold a grudge for a long time. I believe, based on the data that we have, that we're looking at one of two things. If this is a person who snapped emotionally,
okay, hang on.
Didn't. Okay. So far, what was summarized there was that this might have been. We were saying this before we even had, there was even a suspect, right? That this mass murder had a lot of the characteristics of the 11.78% of mass murderers in my work and Dr. Gurgis's work at Columbia that really kind of did so, like BTK, as part of a wider pattern of what was ultimately going to be more serial offenses. And the reason for that, of course, is that we knew from the database that when you use something other than a gun, it greatly increased the likelihood that the motivation was sort of atypical for a mass murder. The weapon choice is the clue, right? So whether it's going to be just that you're bizarre, or that you used it for psychosexual reasons, or it was what just happened to be around, or whatever, and so we started getting the picture of a guy who was going to walk around and have the world sort of pick up that he was hot-headed and weird and grudgy and all of that. And what I'm going to go on to say, as you see, is that I foresaw that he was somebody who would live a very restricted, mechanical existence, but who could explode with rage, right? But who would live that kind of existence. And we're about to say, when you go back to it, that he could have been one of these people who used the knife if he did it impulsively. But because it looked planned, we have to think, why would you use a blade like that? Why would you go in the dark? Why sleeping young women? Whatever, and we start to get the idea that there was a psychosexual motivation. So if you pick it up again, we'll.
Okay, and I think I fixed the sound.
Oh, good.
China, for example, there's a phenomenon where a mother, let's say, who is depressed,
This is
possibly
the
psychotic,
effect, which he isn't.
picks up a blade and goes to a school and kills children because she's in despair about her own life, that kind of thing. But the other thing you see are people who would choose a knife because of its intimacy with the victims, because of the enormous amount of pain that it would give, because of its possible symbolic sexual quality.
Right.
Because the person sees himself.
That's an important piece of this puzzle here that they've been downplaying. So we were telling them right up front that, look, these are the things you need to start looking for. And you've got some of the, you've got the Ann Burgess, you've got Dean there, you've got Greg there. I mean, these aren't no schleps. These people,
and everyone agreed. I mean, that's the important thing. You didn't have anybody
delivering justice, a kind of a hunter figure who goes in like a mission. And what seems to distinguish between these more impulsive mass murderers and these people that are more psychopathic is that there isn't the impulse component.
Right.
They methodically monitor, have a grudge, and plan.
And you said
true.
This compulsive murder, and look at this. He washes his hands compulsively. And by the way, just so everybody knows, I have it from a very reliable source in the Department of Corrections. They are driving him crazy, the other inmates. He's in a maximum security area, 32 other inmates around him. And guess what they're doing? They're torturing him through the vents. And they're taking turns keeping him awake at night.
Well,
just horrible.
He's the epitome of Sartre's idea that hell is other people.
Okay, here we go.
Plan to go in. And what I envision is a person who would treat this evening, this morning, early morning killing, the way we would think about a major event in our lives, like a wedding or having a child or something. It was like D-Day that went in after a period of probably stalking, watching, and committed this act in a kind of an explosion of frenzy, right? But this is not a person who you would picture afterwards to have regret or to say, why did I do this? But a person.
You nailed it. I mean, he sat there like it was just another event in the courtroom. I mean, this is why we do this is why you do what you do, and this is why you wrote the book about it.
Right. And let me emphasize, the point of this is not to say, boy, are we smart. The point of it is to say, Bryan, if you're out there listening, you're not that special. It took 2 minutes to figure you out. There are a lot of people like you. You were basically a pathetic copycat, an amalgam of other failed killers who wound up getting arrested. Right? At least they had a longer run than you did. Right? So I just really want to drive home, because there are some people in the audience that are like, what are we doing this for? Like, is this self-congratulatory? No, of course not.
No, not at all.
It's about that we're trying to prove the point. There's something to this profiling stuff, right? And incidentally, just to correct the record, of the 5 people that are on the screen, how many of them are profilers?
One,
right. There are a lot of people, you heard it here, there are a lot of people out in the world who get called profilers and who call themselves profilers who are not profilers. You cannot just call yourself a profiler. And it's important to understand that, right, Chris?
Absolutely. And there are people who project they were trained by the FBI, and they're not. They were
Right.
not
And
trained by FBI.
which
They,
is,
they
right.
hung out with people that trained people at the FBI. And the only profiler in that picture is up in the upper left-hand corner, and that is Greg Cooper.
Right. Anyone who calls me a profiler, I correct them.
Yep.
I may engage in the act of profiling only to assist someone who is a profiler, but that particular term, really should be applied to people that are trained by behavioral, by the BAU, and not just somebody who is engaged in this, in a kind of poppy way. Even if you have 20 degrees, you still shouldn't use that term. I think, Chris, it's maybe people don't realize that.
Well, and you know what? To bring integrity to the true crime space, call them out. Ask them, call them out. Just what class did you go to, and in Quantico, where did you go? Because everybody knows, I was trained in behavior analysis. That is not profiling. And I was trained through Kevin Brown, who was an FBI agent, because they used to send folks to Quantico. And when I was trained in 1990, it was for a whole separate problem. It was for kids. And so that's my extent. And guess what? For the record, I am not a profiler. I've never have been, and I never will be. Okay.
Right. I mean, but Chris,
I don't play one on YouTube.
A lot of time with you, right? That doesn't make me a homicide detective.
Yeah, exactly. If I have my mother's, my grandmother's ring, it doesn't make me a jeweler. Okay. Because I hung out with Greg Cooper doesn't make me a profiler. I mean,
well, people should be careful about that, and because I hear it applied to all of us.
It's stolen value.
And I emphasize it over and over. It's an honor to have that title, and we should not.
So let's
anyway, so proceed.
You were saying this is amazing.
And who would feel a very great deal of satisfaction. We also have to picture an individual who did so probably in the dark, unless he had some kind of military equipment or a headlight on his hat or something. But I think that figures into this too. Because remember, there is no overt sexual quality to this crime. There may be an undertone of it, and
right.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Been doing it a few weekends.
What they said was, well, we don't have this, this smoking gun. No, but if they would, what you've been saying from the beginning is there is an undertone here. It's an undertone. You cannot dismiss all the stuff they found on his phone and tell the world, well, we don't know.
Right. Although I think he intended to do something sexual to the victim or victims, but it all got disrupted, which is why I think you see such fury against the unexpected parties, that were there. But Chris, I told you my theory about it is that, and I want to get back to the profile, but I really think that there was an intel failure, and it was related to having to shut down his electronics, put it in the phone in pilot mode or whatever. There was some mechanism of knowing what was going on in that house, and it failed because he had shut it down and didn't think there were going to be developments at that hour. And then all of a sudden he was shocked by all these things. I don't know what that is, but with the house gone and with him being mum, we have no way to know. But it just stands to reason that he had some idea and was confident about who was going to be in there and was thrown off.
He knew exactly.
Right. He must have had some idea before that phone went into pilot mode when he left that night. You would think he'd count the cars outside, figure it out. But anyway, but maybe he came around from the back.
Yeah, he did. Let's keep going here because I want to get through.
Was certainly somebody who contributed to the literature meaningfully about how there can be undertones of sexuality in some of these people.
Say it again.
I said I'm talking about Anne as having contributed.
But what it looks like is that this might have been motivated more by some kind of anger or grudge or resentment or misogyny or envy, something like that. And somebody who did so after a cool-headed reflection that they wanted to do this. The sexual component is important because if it's missing, then what you're probably looking at is somebody driven by a wound to the ego. Now, my final point I'll make is that when you have some of these ego-driven killers, you notice that a lot of them do their killing from behind the curtain or in the dark. I think that's very important that this was done in the dark. Think, for example, of the serial killer Robert Hansen, who hunted women in the forest, shooting them from behind in the dark. That's because if they turned around and saw him, he was just a little nobody. But from behind and in the dark, he was everything. He was a god. And I think that that's important because for some of these people, like you'll notice that with serial killers, for example, where there's no overt sexual component, a lot of them will do things like write to the police and boast and seek attention and enjoy that they're slithering underneath you like a serpent that could strike at any time. The ego ultimately catches them too.
Okay, so let's talk about this piece of the puzzle because this is one of the things I think is extremely important for us to put out there right now with the families. And where I'm going to go with this, I want you to opine on what you just said there about, the ego, et cetera.
Yeah.
Because the authorities have not come out and said, A, B, C, and D, whatever that is. I mean, they've said, we don't have a motive. We don't know if it's if there's any SA involved in this. There's no connection, et cetera. My prediction is Bryan or BK is going to fill that gap. What say you, Doug?
I think the last part of the profile that hasn't come to fruition yet is when he controls the narrative in the eyes of law enforcement, in the eyes of the public, by sort of doing what this thing that all these guys do, which is eventually yapping and boasting and lying and everything else. And remember, I think it was the judge, Hitler, who actually said in the courtroom that he thought that Kohberger should be studied, but didn't he say something like, oh no, who was it that said that he thought he would lie? Was that
it was the DA? It's the DA.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's true. I think there is going to be a lot of lying and trying to be interesting and trying to gain things transactionally and all of that. But what I was trying to say there, to expand on it a little, is that when there is not a personality that feels adequate enough to sexually express the desire for domination and control, which is being glimpsed in the P that he's watching, you're going to do that in other ways. You're going to try to manipulate your attorneys. You're going to try to manipulate law enforcement. You're going to manipulate the press. You're going to manipulate, and you're going to sit back and feel powerful watching yourself all over the place. People coming up with stories about you that are ridiculous. No press is bad press. There I am on the front page, whatever. And I think that the idea is that he is getting excited by all of it. And in that weird way, you let him win. See, by forcing him to talk, you don't let him live in the ambiguity. There could be a brilliant, fascinating motive. Once he comes out with the motive, we're going to realize it's garden variety. He's just like all the rest of these dirtbag kind of offenders. And that's the end of it. The mystique goes away. But by letting him keep it to himself, you add to this idea that he's got this brilliant kind of... It reminds me of someone I knew years ago, who someone I knew in the neighborhood who didn't turn in a term paper, and it was because he thought that he was going to do miserably on the term paper, right? And I said to him privately, well, why didn't you just turn the thing in? Well, because now the teacher could just sort of dream that I was going to come up with something brilliant, and I just chose not to turn anything in. So if I got a 0 on it, at least there's this idea that I could have had something amazing. It's all imaginary, right? Well, I understand that logic, and I think by letting this guy hold the motive in, it's making the public fantasize about it in some way, like he's some kind of genius or something, a mastermind or whatever. I'm telling you, it's going to turn out to be nothing special. It's going to be just another garden variety pervert, double life living, kind of studier of criminals who wanted to go in and express this kind of stuff against a stranger onto whom he projected years of resentment and issues and so forth to feel powerful. That's it. Nothing else to it. And I think that having them go in there and going in there and letting him just sort of say that, it'll get it over with. But I don't like the mystique. I don't like the mystique, and I think, Chris, you would agree. What else could it possibly be? What motive could there be other than that?
I mean, they handed him the last opportunity to say, because you've said many times, and I've agreed with you, as well as Greg and Ann and others.
Yeah.
When we've talked, that by saying there's no smoking gun, basically what you've done is presented him with the opportunity to say, yes, there is. And let me tell you what it is. And right now there's this, there's this desire for everybody to know, well, wait a minute, you've got the DA over here saying, well, we'll never really know. Well, do you have a working theory? Did you ever have a working theory? Was there anything? I mean, how in the world would you have solved this case in totality without the DNA? I mean, that's what it makes it sound like when you don't tell the public. I'll give you a perfect example. The other night, they released the video, right? I watched it like everybody else. And you see the far building down at the end of the street. You see the lights come on. You see, or you see them on, and then you see them off. And then you see a person run out of the building like 20 minutes before Kohberger's car even shows up. Okay. Well, guess what? That's the new suspect. Okay. In this case, that's the actual guy. Okay. By not telling the public when they release that video, okay, what you're going to see here is you're going to see a guy come out of this building and come running out and run around. And in about 20 minutes later, you're going to see Kohberger's car enter up onto the street. Okay. That's how you do it. Because right now, that is the new conversation, that the people running out of that building, they're the guys, and it's just this round robin, because you cannot say, that they are so worried about public relations. I don't know what it is. I just don't understand it. You've got to be honest with the public. 1,000%. Look at what happened with Stefan Stearns in Florida. Guess what? That guy's going to prison for life. It's over. He's done. Because they had all kinds of sunshine laws that said, oh, you want to see all this stuff? Fine. Here we go. The point being that the point I'm trying to make is it just re-victimizes the families by the DA, by the cops coming out and saying, well, yeah, he was following the crime and the crime scene on his phone. No, he wasn't. That was part of it. He also had other stuff on his phone. And when the public sees it, they're going to ask you, why didn't you just say this?
Well, because this is the part where I think what you might be dealing with are people that are being so logical, but they don't want to make any interpretation. So they're saying the presence of violent P, the presence of information on offenders, etc., the costume outfit, photos, whatever, the multiple images of women, young women, whatever, that you don't want to kind of leap to the conclusion of what it means without him telling you what it means. And I suppose that from being a scientist, I appreciate the caution. But at the same time, what we do here has to be partially interpretive, that we put the totality of everything together and we say, but the interpretation we're arriving at is excluding in a logical way why a person would have all this stuff if it's not related to motive. Why would you acquire a blade 8 months before you kill somebody if you did not have a fantasy that had nothing to do with a particular victim, but was just about all women or all, young, attractive people that you feel rejected by or whatever. I mean, obviously, you have the idea first. That's a really big clue. So I think it comes down to just not wanting to make a leap. The trouble is that they're not coming out and saying, there is some stuff there, but we don't know what it means. They're coming out and they're saying in a way which I also don't think is scientific, where you declaratively say, there was nothing sexual.
Yeah.
There was no serial element. There's no whatever. And I think that's the part that's a little frustrating, because what should be is, this is a possibility that's on the table. We don't have evidence one way or the other. We're going to wait until this guy talks, and we don't believe him anyway. So, I also think that there's a part of the population that doesn't want to know the motive. They like the mystique. Sort of like those people who get mad at the idea that they might one day figure out who Zodiac was, or bristled at the idea that DNA might have cracked the Jack the Ripper case, or that don't want Lizzie Borden to be shown to have killed the stepmother and father. They like the mystique. And I'm sorry, but the fact of the matter is, we that if when this guy comes out and tells his nonsense stories, which of course he's going to do, eventually, it isn't going to be that interesting.
Well,
Sorry.
and you talked about Danny Rollins, and
Right.
yes, Bryan was looking into him. Yes,
And a few other people, I think.
and a few others. Who else do you think he was looking at?
I rather not get into speculating about that. I think that whoever he was looking at, the common denominator would have been that they were people who committed home invasion style offenses, who used weapons that were not guns. And by the way, a gun is the most common weapon used by serial killers. We know that from the serial killer database that is down at Florida Gulf Coast and Radford, right? That's the big database they get that data from. I talk about it in the New Evil. Guns are the most common. Blades, not so common. They're used often by serial killers, but they have a kind of sexualized quality to them. They're very intimate. They take a lot of bravery and comfort to get in there with the victim and do that kind of thing to them. They're sometimes, if you want to get psychoanalytic, a kind of substitute for feelings of inadequacy sexually, which conspicuously seem to be present, in my opinion, in this guy. And, just an opinion, but I think so, because he was a failure with that. And, I think they would have been offenders that went in kind of like, and targeted young women and expressed this kind of, right. And also that did, the other common denominator between Rolling and Bundy is doing things with the dead person.
Right.
Posing, committing sexual stuff, whatever. But the idea being that there's an experimentation post-mortem that is interesting between those events.
And we talked about Rawlings earlier, Perpetual. So that's a great point.
No,
but
right.
here's some, when we start separating, right? That's good stuff on his phone, but then you start taking it to the next level.
Right.
And you start looking at his phone and you go, well, where are the pictures of Rawlings on his phone? Oh, they're not there. Where are the pictures of so-and-so on his phone? They're not there. Why is he dressing like TB, Ted Bundy? Oh, they are there. Those photographs are there. Why is he holding his thumb up in a certain way? Why is he cosplaying in a hoodie like TB?
And downloading Bundy articles.
And downloading articles about Bundy, etc. So he
started. Why is the, sorry, Chris, why is the alibi a place that is associated with somebody they thought Bundy killed and asked him about it on the day of his execution?
Right. And we did a whole show on the differences of that. You can go see it. And we did Elliot Rogers, we did Bryan, we did TB. Okay.
I want to go to school in Washington.
Yes. I want to jump into your assessment here.
But the ego drives a lot of it. And I suspect that ego figures very heavily into this case, and that this is somebody who feels he was basically terrifying everybody and enjoys sitting back and saying, now all the women of the world are terrified that I could strike at any time. In other words, this person doesn't know if he is everything or nothing. Is he a god or is he a nobody? But in the dark, committing those crimes, I imagine he felt something like the deliverer of justice.
Right.
Fascinating.
Sorry,
Thank
I was
you.
muted. But there are some mass murderers that operate in teams, but you can count on a few hands the number of mass murders that are not associated with gangs or criminal enterprise, mafia killings, things like that, where you're going to have more than one offender working together.
Okay, I want to grab this point here. Great point, but unfortunately, Bundy did not wear hoodies. Bundy did do thumbs up in the courtroom. Okay, but if you watch the series on Ted Bundy, okay, on Netflix, he's in a hoodie. And if Bryan was watching that same series, then he may have thought, you know what I need to do is I need to cosplay almost immediately after that situation and dress like Ted.
Well, there was, as I understood it from the Dateline thing, there's a temporal relationship between watching something about Bundy and then this photo, dressing up like this. In other words, it's not like they're just making a leap. There's like a time relationship between them, which is why the conclusion is that this was an attempt, this ghoul photo of his. He looks to me kind of like the Crypt Keeper in that photo. Remember the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, the old DC comics and the TV show with that cackle and the bad puns and everything? He kind of has a little Crypt Keeper thing going on there. He's got the gaunt face and the, don't you think? Little ghoul-like.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, I don't like showing it, so I'm not going to show it anymore.
It wasn't there. Well,
go ahead.
No. I don't want to make the comment. I was having like that thing where something pops in my head and I decide not to say it. So proceed.
Okay. I mean, if we just use common sense too, and we break it down, okay, the common sense here is that we're forgetting, and I think Thompson's is partial to blame here. People are not people, but he wants the public to ignore the fact that this is on his phone. How do you ignore that? Because when Cellebrite comes out and they show you this one, okay, and then they show you all of this, and they do this forensic dump. The DA is out there, the cops are out there in the world saying, guess what? It's a tragedy that these 4 died, but we don't know why. Well, when they do that, they're leaving it up to this guy. This is the guy who's going to tell the story. And this is disturbing in my opinion.
And he'll tell the story with the same relish that the Crypt Keeper would tell it.
He'll tell it exactly with his thumb up. Think about this, everybody. By not taking the truth head on, now Cellebrite's talking. The people at Cellebrite, why are they doing it? For marketing. Of course they are. That makes sense. They sell this software to law enforcement around the world. Why not get your 2 best people that were going to testify in the trial to come out and start talking about what they actually found? And then when you hear, the DA say, well, there's no connection. Well, according to Cellebrite, there was a connection. His phone had joined the Wi-Fi at the restaurant 2 of the victims worked at. Either they're lying or somebody's not wanting to say, guess what, everybody? At the Mad Greek, Bryan Kohberger's phone connected to the Wi-Fi. End of story. And when they say, well, he wiped everything off, including details of what the team found, including scrub files, private browsing, VPN activity, and obsessive downloads about other serial killers. Well, we don't know if this guy is a serial killer. Really? Apparently, Cellebrite knew there was a serial killer on the phone because they just said in this particular article other serial killers. So they thought BK was on his way to becoming a serial. Okay. It's not it's not rocket science.
Chris, do you have the image of him with the thumbs up?
Right there.
Yeah. I want to just point something out that this is, now I'm not saying that Kohberger knew this. I'm just saying it's one of those fascinating little coincidences that mesmerize somebody with a turn of mind like mine. But do you know the origin of the thumbs up and thumbs down? Where it comes from?
No.
Okay. Thumbs up and thumbs down come from the gladiator fights of ancient Rome. The audience would indicate with a thumbs up or thumbs down if the person should die or live. Thumbs down meant put your blade down, spare them. Thumbs up meant swords up, blades up, kill them. And the thumbs up means take your sharp instrument and let them die. See? And it's a disturbing thing when you think about that, right? Also, the proximity of this photo to the offenses suggests that killing strangers, these strangers who were symbolic of whatever was upsetting this guy, made him feel restored. Right. And I think all offenders who go from fantasy escalate into killing for the first time, where the P is not enough, the fantasizing is not enough. And I think he's probably still fantasizing in jail about what he, in prison about what he did. I think that all of those guys need a precipitating event that pushes you over the edge, where the fantasy is not enough. And I think it was that females were complaining about him. And here he was boasting that he was going to pick one of the women up, that he could have any woman he wanted if he tried. Can you imagine that this guy, so much for the incel theory, he thought that he could pick up anybody he wanted, right? Blissfully unaware of how weird he was. Total opposite of an incel who knows he's a loser and nobody's going to want him, right? So forget that incel nonsense. But the idea is he thinks he could have anybody he wants, and then all of a sudden he finds out these women that he doesn't even feel should be getting educated in the first place are the ones who may cause him to lose the TA position, and which is helping to fund his education, as I understand it, the whole thing. And the idea that they would collude to get rid of him when he wanted to get rid of them, viewing them as a kind of collective pile of vermin, because I think that's how he saw women, some women, was just infuriating. And he had already been watching this particular group of women fixating, making a science, at least one of them in particular, making a kind of science out of them, knowing everything about them. There was the fact that isn't called stalking. 23 trips, Chris, is unbelievable to me. Now, there's an old, I hate to call it a joke because it's one of those little quips that is supposed to be amusing, but it's deeply disturbing, that somebody once said to me was, this is the definition of stalking. The definition of stalking is two people spend a day with each other. They eat breakfast together. They eat lunch together. They eat dinner together. They take a shower, possibly together. They get into bed, and only one of them knows about it. See?
Yeah.
And that's the idea, is you have to picture somebody who's watching everything like talk about stargazing, studying from afar, knows everything. This guy, I'm telling you, if you were to give him a piece of information about, let's say, Maddie, that was wrong, he would know that it was wrong and correct you. He would know everything about her, everything. I have talked to stalkers that, people have gotten in trouble for stalking, that will know things about the person, like the cereal they like to eat, what hand they use to eat it with, when they change their routine, When they changed their hair a little bit, they flipped it over the left ear today instead of the right. Their makeup was a little different. They wore that outfit last Tuesday, and now they're wearing it today. That you have to picture that and the meticulous study, and then to say it's not stalking. Well, then what is it? What is that? Intel collecting? Obsessing? I don't know. But that's creepy. And also, why did he have IDs of coworkers in his possession?
Oh,
Women, right?
by the way, that remember in that search warrant, that was 2 IDs, but I think there were multiple in a box.
Women, right?
Well, we know of 2 that were coworkers.
Were they women?
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming yes, they are. But remember, those 2 IDs are only the 2 they're letting us know about right now. They're holding.
Yeah.
Well, he's the helper, right? We call him the helper. Okay. And he's got this whole and by the way, that was years before any of this happened here. So he's been processing this for quite some time. And we've said that from the beginning. And now it's all starting to unfold in totality. And here's the sad part, because this is where I actually wish the authorities would just come out and say, look, here's the other side of the coin here. Because once that Cellebrite report drops and a couple others, what other YouTubers, if you're listening, okay, the 340 or 51 reports so far, that's just the eggs. Okay. You don't have the cake yet. The cake is in the behavior science report from the BAU that was sent to the agency that says this is the type of offender you're looking for. This is why this offender may or may not have done it. And it's going to be a carbon copy of what Gary said and what Greg has said and what Ann has said. It's going to be
you. All of us.
Yeah, but if you were to overlay it, that's what the BAU report's going to say. The CAS team reports, okay, the cellular analysis team reports, where it's going to say 23 plus times it hit this time. And now you have Cellebrite coming out and saying, well, we were handed the phone or the data and we were able to go back, and guess what? They discovered that the intent was brought up. Okay. How many times did he shut his phone off? And that's this particular report here. Okay. And why did he just turn his phone off? It wasn't just that he put it in airplane mode. No, he hit the off button. Okay. And so as a result of that, look at Heather Barnett, Senior Director of Forensic Research at Cellebrite, told The Independent, there is no way that company would let her tell The Independent that any of this information is incorrect. This is what I know that company. They're an Israeli company. They are spot on. There are thousands of law enforcement agencies that use this company.
Well, Chris, let me ask you a question. Just playing devil's advocate, as I want to do. Is it possible that, and I know there are people, I've seen other podcasters and experts say that it is not true that he could appeal. But let's say there is some idea that he might. Is it possible that there's a desire to not get into motive because it could prejudice too much his attempt to get an appeal and actually hand him an appeal? In other words, if you go out there and you say we think his motive was this, that, and the other thing, could it affect an appeal process? And they don't want to do that? By speculating about what, is it possible they're just trying to keep it neutral and let him define, if he wishes, what the reason was, and let's just leave well enough alone? Is it possible?
Look, I'm a little out of my lane to answer that question. However, I will tell you in my experience, anybody who's been convicted of a crime, okay, and it just so happens the crime, of murder, the Supreme Court has made it very clear. You can't say he's not going to get an appeal. Okay. Now he has a certain time to do it, and he has certain parameters that they have to do it under. Okay. But remember, an appellate attorney is going to be provided him. And if he feels that his attorney did not follow through on certain things, and Taylor, then, it's very possible that his attorney is going to say, okay, let's file an appeal. I said that in a show the day of the hearing. We were live, and I said, that's going to be the story at the end of this. Well, Thompson's out there saying it's a done deal. It's over. It's never over.
Yeah.
It's never over.
Not with this guy.
Well, this is one of the extremely high profile problems, right? And I mean, the slaughter of 4 sleeping college students, I mean, it's horrific. So I thought Ann Taylor outlawyered him, my personal opinion. I think, from day one, and I had Billy Little on a couple of weeks ago. If you want to see a guy who knows what time it is, go watch that show. He's done 17 death penalty cases. And if you want to hear a legal brilliant mind, he's the equivalent of Dr. Brucato in my opinion.
So he thought that an appeal was possible?
Oh, he said they'd be derelict not to file an appeal. Yeah, no, he thinks that Kohberger's going to throw something at the wall and see.
I'm worried about an imitation of Bundy attempting to escape.
Well,
I'm also, I think, look, if there were ever a candidate for saying the wrong thing to the wrong person and getting the crap beaten out of him, potentially even not making it out, leaving in a casket. Unfortunately, look, I don't, how do I say this? I don't advocate such things, but I'm not surprised when they happen, because he has a smug, impossible to get along with, condescending personality where you got to picture this guy thinking that he's better than all the other riffraff that are in there, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I want to emphasize, because people keep asking, what do you think he's thinking in prison? Well, we know from offenders of the type that we think this guy is, that they find ways to keep the fantasy alive and enjoy it. If you have seen, they did a long form article on my ideas about this case in the Daily Mail, and then they did another one on the Bundy ideas that I had. And then they made all these little videos of me talking about it when I was on an episode of a podcast with Howard Blum for the Daily Mail. And one of them that got circulated a lot was where I was talking about the serial killer Jerry Brudos. And Jerry Brudos was a foot fetishist who managed to get companies that sold shoes to send catalogs to the prison so that he could continue the fantasy. I mean, and that was enough for him. Well, that's how obsessed he was. Well, you can bet that one way or another, things are going to slip into this guy that are going to excite him. One thing I'm terrified about is the stuff that fans are going to send him. Are they going to send him crime scene photos that he could look at to enjoy? Are they going to send him, praise and things that sort of, that stroke his ego? Are they going to send him sexualized material? Who knows? But one way or another, they're going to do it. I spoke to one of the members of our foundation, a very great authority on sexual homicide, Vernon Gayberth, who is, as I said, is in the Cold Case Foundation. And I remember once when I was writing the New Evil, which he reviewed, I said to him, Vernon, what do you think people did in the days before photography and P? How did they, these visual sexual offenders do it?
It's still a family show. Still a family show. Remember?
Oh, I know. Well,
okay.
he said they probably would have drawn it or just imagined it. In other words, you cannot take from this kind of person the fantasizing. I have to be honest with you, I would be shocked if he wasn't thinking about it right in the courtroom.
I think he's going to get, well, first of all, right now he's in PC, right? He's in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
You know, I've got it from a very solid, respectable source that says the other inmates are torturing him through the vents.
Mm-hmm. Not a popular guy, huh?
Not a popular guy right now.
What a shock.
And they're taking turns.
Not inviting him to any parties, huh?
And they're taking turns keeping him up. Now that said, okay, here's the sad part. He's going through the process right now, right? Where they're trying to figure out, he's got to go through all the doctors, you know, he's got to talk to guys like you. You know, you go in, you do your assessment. Okay, here's, you know, what's going on with this guy, medications or whatever. You guys all figure that piece of the puzzle out. Once that happens and he goes through all of these medical assessments, he goes through, you know, are you going to hurt yourself? Are you a threat to other inmates? You know, where are you going to go? I think he's going to move for his time in prison towards AB, Aryan Brotherhood, because he has to, right? And they'll use him as a soldier in the prison system, okay? And he'll find a new awakening while he's in there. But the other piece of that, the other side, the other sad piece, okay, is that people are going to start sending him emails on that pad that he's going to have an opportunity to see. Okay. And he's going to get it. And when that happens, okay, game on. Game on. It's sad. It's sad because they left, you know, they left it up to him. Okay. So that said.
Very psychopathic leader figure and a kind of weaker-willed figure that works alongside them to eliminate a group of people.
I was making about why
but I suspect that the essence of
that I didn't believe he worked with anybody else. That's what I'm talking about.
The isolation of the offender, the difficulty forming any kind of allegiance or alliance to a human being. So consequently, I am convinced this is probably a lone wolf offender. You know, and I think these questions Anne is raising about the absence of a lot of of evidence really speaks to the planning and the fact that this is not an impulsive mass murder. And as I was emphasizing earlier, that really alters our profile because.
Okay, just for a second, that's not your picture of the book. For the record, that's my picture of the book. I went to the bookstore and took it myself. So, but I appreciate you bringing it up, and I have the metadata to prove it. So, but I appreciate you bringing it up.
People think it's funny because the fingernails have French tips. I assume it was Karen's hand in the picture.
Yeah. It is.
French tips.
It's Karen's hand. And it's always like, oh, he planted the glove. Okay. Really? Okay. Now I took somebody else's picture. You know, I hate to break it to you, but I own the picture. I don't take anything from anybody ever.
Karen said, "It's me." LOL.
Yeah, Karen, my wife. Once again, the McDonoughs have to always defend ourselves, right? It's just so amazing that, you know, trolls come in here and try to, you know, get me on a copyright or something to that effect. It's like, come on, you know, thank you very much, but I'll be more than glad to provide the picture.
Well, the implication of it being someone else's page is that someone else thought of it. Like, I went and took the book and looked at page 118 in that same Bundy book before you did. Okay,
yeah, and
I haven't heard anybody else say it. I mean, but who cares? I mean, At the end of the day, the point here is to get to the heart of why this guy did what he did,
Right.
to prevent anybody from doing it again. That is it. Otherwise, he is about as much interest as, like a scientist studying a bug. I'm not interested in the unique personality of a given mantis. Just this mantis, to understand other mantises. But who cares, right? But yes, it is amazing how you're held to a very different standard, Chris, than everybody else.
It's crazy. So let's get back to business.
With somebody that
But I had to address that because
it's hysterical.
Because you have to.
The friendship,
something like this, and went in and did it, carried it out like that. You've got to imagine a person who, in the cool light of reason, could think of doing something like this and carry it out without, and be rational enough in the moment,
right,
to do something like, for example, did he wear booties or something why was he not covered in blood, leaving trail? Did he bring a change of clothes? Did he? And I have to tell you, I envision a person who went in there dressed for the occasion. He probably had that knife kind of hanging at his side and kind of wearing stuff to dark clothing. And, I really picture somebody who went in like he was going in for a mission.
That all turned out to be true.
It all turned out to be true, 1,000%. 1,000%. And by the way, I have some other stuff that I want to find here for a minute.
The knife hanging at his side.
What did you think about how he just did not play with any emotion in the court hearing? How did that play out with you?
Well,
in your mind.
What I found interesting about it is, and I explained this actually.
By the way, those are my wife's nails.
That's the funniest part.
In the photograph.
The idea that's not that the hand is there with the.
Let me zoom in on my sweetheart's nails here.
It's like Thing in the Adams. Thank you, Thing.
Are these your fingers? Are these your fingers? Whoever that was, just asking for my wife.
Nailed it.
You're using her fingers in your pictures. That's got to stop. Go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
Okay, hysterical. No, but there was a News Nation interview I did with Brian Enton and Susan Considine, I think was the other person. Yes. And I was asked this very same thing. It was right after he had the court hearing. So what I said was that this is where we have to understand the distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy is reading the feelings of other people, and whether you do good or bad things with those feelings that you've detected is a matter of compassion. For example, you cannot lure a child into your car if you don't make a face or say things that are going to win the confidence of a child. You need empathy, right? To do that, you have to fake caring about them and seeing their distress or seeing their, okay. So what I think is, it was interesting that in the courtroom, he didn't even have the wherewithal to pretend that he was sorry or felt bad or cared or whatever. There was no feeling the room that it might have behooved him to do that or make a statement or whatever. Instead, he came across the association my mind kept making. I think I said this elsewhere. I don't remember where I said it, but there were two things that came into my mind. One is that I kept thinking of the line from Edgar Allan Poe from The Raven that says, "His eyes had all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming." So that there was that imagining somebody just sitting there having the darkest, most hideous thoughts pass through. But then there was also this association to that. Do you remember that television show V? It was called V.
Okay.
Where people, they looked like humans, but then they could like take their face off and they were a lizard. Remember that TV show? Yeah. It was a science fiction show. Well, It sort of reminds me of that. It's like a reptile masquerading as a person. Just take that mask off and you'll see that disgusting, slithering reptilian personality underneath. I think he had some whiff of the capacity to fake social skills just a little bit, but not as good as somebody like Bundy. He was sort of like a little lacking in that. and he certainly did not have the wherewithal to pretend he gave a flying leap about these victims to try to get any kind of sympathy or leniency or whatever. He just basically sat there like, I'm not even going to give you that, you know. And I think that reptilian personality really came through. And you have to imagine a person like, we saw glimpses of him when he was out of control a little bit and became furious at Kaylee and what happened, you know, because he wasn't expecting her and all these other kinds of things. But what I really picture is what he would have been like if everything went perfectly according to plan. I think what the victim would have seen was that reptile, that cold reptile looking at you with those dead eyes and saying, do this now. This is what I want you to do for the fantasy, right? And thinking of you where it doesn't even matter if you're sleeping or dead or whatever, because you don't matter. You're a non-entity. It's like when Ted Bundy would use a ligature on a victim out in the forest where there was nobody around, and he would scream, I am God, you know, things like that. And nobody would hear him. Maybe you'd hear a coyote in the background or the fluttering of a bird or something, but he would just scream, you know, that kind of thing. So I just think that what you're seeing there is what this guy looks like when he feels he's in control. Calculating, condescending, staring at you with the dead eyes of a dreaming raven sitting there
to answer Peekaboo
right, that's what I'm saying. He's got whiffs of it. Yeah.
He has empathy. Does he have empathy?
I think he had just enough to know that he shouldn't be that overt about some aspects of himself. And that's why I think there was probably this fantasizing about being a Bundy-like figure where you have mastery over it. But the thing is, he was unequipped to be that good at it. He was lacking some. So that, well, he certainly had no compassion. But so the idea being that this guy was not particularly good at faking it. He would try to lure somebody, and the things he would say to them were weird. It was too obvious that he was strange. So Bundy could masquerade. He could get you to, you know, go with him to his car and attack you, you know, that kind of thing. This guy, no, he'd have to attack you when you were sleeping, and there was no interaction necessary because he was no good at it. So that's what you see in people who lack the ability to use empathy as a tool for crime. So he was certainly lacking enough of it, but compassion, forget it, zero. He was, as far as he was concerned, he was doing like what a spider does with an insect. Couldn't care less. The spider doesn't sit there and think, this fly has a family of larvae somewhere, and I feel really sorry for them. You know, it doesn't care. It's just a bug. That's how this guy would think of a victim. Doesn't care. And he thinks of the family as nothing but larvae. No interest. So cold.
Could he have put cameras in the home, and this is what looked like to be the vacuum, or wore one? Ultimately, he said he would be vindicated. I guess we'll see. What do you? We talked about that with the neighbor, the Asian neighbor that the camera
student that
yeah.
Well, there was my understanding of that from the Dateline reporting is that things of hers went missing, and she had brought Bryan into her confidence. There was even some question of her being romantically interested in him, and you know, again, bye incel theory, right? So, but the idea being that those things went missing, prized possessions went missing. Then she asks him for some help putting a camera, and the next thing you know, she starts wondering if he's using the passcode or the camera to watch her, and that has a very serial killer, you know, sexually perverse whiff to it, because God only knows what you're watching, right, or why you're watching it. And you know, it raises the question of, did he have ways of doing surveillance on other people that we're unaware of? Who knows? The house is gone. Do you know how tiny some of the cameras and mics are that you could get with a simple search on the internet?
I used to wear a button camera.
Yeah.
When I worked Vice, even back then we had button cameras, and you know, there are all kinds of cool stuff. How about? Do
you think he was in the house, Chris?
You know, I think he was very familiar with that house.
Yes, even if it was just from watching videos and doing intel or watching through the window.
He knew exactly where he was going that night.
He was a criminal, a cat burglar.
Right. He knew exactly. I've always been wondering, where is the TV that was taken out of his apartment by the defense?
Yeah.
It was a smart TV that was removed, and we don't know where that's at. Only Ann Taylor has that on her side. They're not going to reveal what they may not have done.
Did you hear, Chris, the story about Kohberger having stolen a very valuable coin collection when he was younger from someone that was worth like something like tens of thousands of dollars?
I have not heard that one, but
I heard that on some podcast. I was curious if there was truth to it, but I certainly think that during his drug use days, he would have been a very adept thief, cat burglar. You know, when the question is coming up, is he a psychopath? I don't know. You know, somebody will assess that at some point. You weren't allowed to use that word in the courtroom, right? But if they check it out, I mean, you know, he had a lot of characteristics that are really interesting. Criminal versatility, you know, having previously stolen, he committed murder. There was some drug use and some lying.
I gotta keep you on the rails here, because we got to get to the station. It's almost 2 hours in.
Okay. Go ahead.
I wonder if we too wonder if he had the hoodie underneath the overall. So I don't know. I don't think we have that answer yet. But I got a bunch of questions for you, Gary, because they're all popping up here. So that's why I want to keep you at Grand Central.
Okay.
We're headed that. I love Gary. Dr. Gary, was he born this way, or did something happen while he was growing up?
It's impossible to say. That the vast majority of these types of offenders, it's probably a mixture. But you might need a certain kind of brain configuration. But if treated a certain way by the world, you might apply those things pro-socially instead of doing something antisocial. But we don't know. There are some people where it looks like it's purely stuff that happened to them, twist them in that direction. But there are very few people that look like they were just sort of, you know, in the womb, you know, bad seed. There are a few examples, but there aren't many. And there are also very few examples of offenders that day in and day out did things that would be considered horrendous and evil. Most of these people had periods of living a double life, right? Even the worst of them. You know, I am sure the more that comes out, we're going to hear, you know, a kind of sob story about him having been picked on and this. I've even heard people trying to say they feel sorry for him, how he's getting treated in jail, as if he's a bully, being bullied. He's a victim. And I am, you know, like, if I was at the end of my rope with the pro-burger people, who I call pro-murder, because let's face it, they might as well be at this point. The guy is a self-confessed quadruple murderer, and you're supporting him, right? I mean, so you're pro-murder. If I were at the end of my rope before now, the rope's gone. I mean, I've lost all patience with it, because how much more do you need? At what point does it become diluted? Goofy, weird, you know, so I don't even listen to it anymore. Any message I get from these people, I read one line, delete. You know, it goes into the unseen, you know, kind of wastebasket of whack job, you know, weird and offensive messages I get, which is a very special place I would never want to visit. You have an inbox? You get messages like that, Chris?
You piece of crime. What kind of messages?
Whoa! Do I get messages from Kohberger fans? Holy crap!
Oh man, there are channels that just do whole programs on me. It's nuts. I don't, you know, okay, whatever. You know, have a good day.
You live rent free in their brain. You should be honored.
You know what? Yeah, okay. How about this one here? I'm wondering if it's more of an altruistic killing or existential motivated homicide. In that, if that were the case, it would have been an endless pursuit.
Hold on. No, I gotta take this one apart because I can't follow it. Hold on. I'm wondering if it were more of an altruistic killing or existential motivated homicide. If that were the case, it would have been an endless pursuit. I can't follow the point, because there is no way to view a quadruple murder as altruistic. What does that mean? Do you understand that, Chris? Like the Boy Scout gone mad, like what does that mean?
And Eve, help us understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, explain it a little bit. I'm sure that there's a point here.
We love Eve
but
too.
I just don't understand. I love these kinds of
Great
questions,
question.
but I want to just frame it so that
this is called Let's Stump Dr. Brucato. Eve has started off the evening with stumping Doc B.
that's outdone by Eve.
Okay, I'm going to say we're going to come back to that one. Okay, great start. Merrick, he had to target Maddie. He planned to slip into the house and do what he wanted with her and get out unnoticed. His plan was completely ruined. How else can you come up with reasoning for this?
I think that's pretty much what I mean. But I do want to say something about there are really two narratives that were born of our way of thinking in that original profile. One was which I, from the beginning I had said, I think there was one target and everyone else was sort of, unfortunately, not supposed to be there and died horribly. But Chris has put forward an alternative theory, which I think has a great deal of merit and should not be dismissed, and he deserves credit for it, which is that perhaps the entire house was targeted by somebody who had Bundy-esque sorority style, killing fantasies. And that becomes very interesting when we think about him also looking at Danny Rowling, who also targeted sorority houses, right? Both offenders having done that. That's interesting. And if that's true, then it raises the question of if tearing the house down just sort of added to that sort of feeling of, the house is in a way a victim. And what do you think, Chris? I mean, I know that's been a hypothesis you've put forward. I mean, it sounds like so far that can't be ruled out.
Well, when after you had laid out what you had laid out,
yeah,
I started thinking about that, and we started, having conversations. And one of the things that came to my mind at the time was, okay, why is this? Why are there so many women in this house and they're just girls? Why is anybody wanting to go into this house and kill just one?
Right. And who has photos of lots of sorority or type.
Yeah, on his phone, which eventually will come out as well, so that the public knows.
Well, it's been said at the Dateline thing.
Right.
And right. It has sorority girls, Yeah.
And so
sorority women, excuse me.
And we talked about Danny Rollins earlier, Bundy. And so, and I think he's just a piece of it, right? Danny Rollins.
Yeah, but just another person he was interested in.
Right. If he would have had photographs of Danny Rollins on his phone and, all that other stuff, if he would have had that piece of that puzzle, I mean, what's the connection there? We've got the K-bar knife. Okay, fine. But he doesn't have this other stuff. Yeah. And so we can say that, yes, he was going after, looking into him as well as Kemper and other things. And Ann even said on that profile that it wouldn't surprise her that he'd been in that house. Greg said the exact same thing. Yeah. And so it's not going to surprise anybody that we think it's possible he could have gone in there. Okay. We don't know if he was mimicking Danny Rollins because of a couple things. Number one, okay. Yes, it's a sorority situation. Okay. Etc. But if you look at the other connecting pieces of this puzzle, he was obsessed with Ted Bundy. He was obsessed by him. His mother was obsessed by him. There are things that are in their house that will point in certain directions. And as a result of that, you have to say, okay, we've got to step back and say, okay, well, then whoever this person was at the time, why would they choose this house? What's in the house that is so interesting? And of course, it comes back down to the girls in the house. And so I thought, okay, there is a voyeuristic aspect to this. Okay. Rawlings wasn't really into that. He just wanted to go in and kill. Okay. And his planning wasn't as extensive as Bryan Kohberger's. Ted Bundy, his planning was extensive like Kohberger. And so I think if we were to go in, if I were to go in, or you or anybody else were to go in and sit down with this gentleman, I'm going to get hammered for even saying that. If we were to go down and sit with him and say, hey, people are comparing you to, an incel killer, to Rawlings, etc. You know what I think he'd probably say? He'd probably go, yeah, I looked at them, but they weren't interesting. But who was interesting is where his alibi was one of the victims they thought that Bundy had done. In fact, they asked him, one of the investigators before they killed him, they talked about that case in the exact same park that Bryan Kohberger was going to use for his alibi. What are the odds of that?
That's what tipped me off. In addition to sorority style, that Bundy was the one to, and that's why I started thinking about the book with the page 118 very early on, that I thought this is going to be about Bundy. And then when the Dateline stuff came out, it was like kismet that I had already appeared on previous episodes, and then I was able to go on there and say, there you go.
And so then when I went to the house and I was standing there, I was thinking, I saw that brick underneath Dylan's room. I think we're forgetting that he was a peeping Tom or voyeur. There's a voyeurism piece of this. You don't come back to a house 23 separate times, if not more.
Right.
And not have this other piece of the puzzle.
And it shows progression from P to the watching to the, like we see in the serial killer type.
And now we have
keep doing it, because
we have Wi-Fi connection confirmed from Cellebrite at the Mad Greek. Okay. And so he's into this, and he's doing what we would call victimology target selecting. Okay. And he is targeting these people. And can Palantir track them? Palantir is an interesting company. Palantir is an AI open source intelligence group. And the first agency to ever use them was LAPD. And they utilized them you ever heard of the broken window theory?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the broken window theory is, if you have broken windows in certain areas of a particular city, you're going to have a higher rate of criminology or criminal problems.
Oh,
so
I've heard that somewhere. Yeah.
So what Palantir did is they created an AI source that LAPD dumped all of their crime reports for a couple of years. Okay. For a couple of years. And I actually know the owner of the company.
Oh.
And they ended up spitting out information where they would go park police cars, empty police cars, to deter crime. So could they have caught him? Probably not, because you need data in to get data out. Okay. Data in, data out. So to get back to my thought process, when I saw that the sorority situation that Ted Bundy left off, That's what that was his last big caper outside of the girl, the 12-year-old,
Mhm.
which he never talked about, right, Gary?
Right.
He never wanted to dive into her. But I thought to myself, if this guy, and when we knew it was Kohberger, and then we started seeing some of these things fold out, as we were talking, it occurred to me that why in the world, who does he want to be better than? Does he want to be better than Danny? Does he want to be better than Ted? And then when you start looking at his phone and you go, my gosh, there's photographs of Ted on his phone. Is he idolizing him to the next level? And if so, is he channeling him?
Right.
Then
Going out to Washington to study and follow it, right? And you start to wonder about it. Picking that park, it's conspicuous. But Chris, one of the people in the audience made a comment we should address, which is that they said, well, anybody who's studying criminology could have photos of Bundy. Yeah, but this is like, Chris, let's say you were a student of history and you were studying Genghis Khan. And then we get a copy of your phone and we discover that in addition to downloading lots of images of Genghis Khan, there are snapshots of you dressed up as Genghis Khan with the club and the hat and the beard and the whole thing. But then in addition, you're like looking up P on the internet and getting aroused by people who are like enacting the offenses of Genghis Khan and violating women. And Genghis Khan has something like 800 children because of the number of essays he committed against people, right? So it's very common for people who do genetics testing to discover a relationship with Genghis Khan because he had so many freaking kids, right? He was like, the Elon Musk of his generation with all the children he had, right? So it's one of the, I just mean that he had a lot of kids. That's the only connection I'm making. So, but the idea being that I just want to say that there's a difference between looking up and dressing as and being interested in the sexualized enactment of the fantasies of that person. That is different than studying. And I don't dismiss that as being just what ordinary criminology students do.
I don't think criminology students doing screenshots of the people they're studying, multiple screenshots, and on their phones. For what? What's the purpose of it? To show everybody, hey, I'm studying Ted Bundy, and by the way, here's the hoodie. I'm wearing this hoodie, and by the way, I'm reading this book. I'm trying to learn about duality of personality. I'm trying to.
I think he was reading that book. I think he was reading it. I don't know.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I'm not buying that. I worked homicide for 13 years. I've done over 300 murders. I don't have a picture of any of the guys that I ever.
To quote Judge Judy, "Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining."
Yeah, so that is a really interesting point. But anyway, where the bottom line where I was going is
the theory about the house.
It was a theory that I thought the house in totality was the target, and in my opinion, all of those women, 2 of them are very lucky to be alive today.
Oh, yeah.
I think Ethan, as you've said, Dr. Brucato and others, I think Ethan was a curveball and threw him off, and that's why he eliminated him immediately when he got down to the second floor.
And he envied him, I think.
I think you're right. And we've talked about, Ethan fighting back. Maybe he was kicking, and that could explain, some of the wounds to his legs, but we won't know for sure until the autopsy reports are ever released. I don't ever see that happening because they're released to the families, and the families typically, in all due respect, will never put that into the environment. However, we do know that he was brutally killed inside of his bed.
But
okay, so let's go to this question.
Sorry, just to address something in the audience that's very important. For somebody who was covering his tracks, Isn't it interesting that he wouldn't have deleted those photos of himself? It's almost as if he wanted them to be seen. It's like BTK in the house having the photos of himself dressed up in the crazy costumes like the victims of the whole thing. It's like you want someone to find them so that you could go, this is what I really am. This is me. Say, aren't I great? And, you almost get the feeling that that photo in the hood, that this is something like he intended to post or something, like he thought it was like sexy or something. That he was like dark, dark Bryan or something, like, look at me now, ladies, that kind of thing. And it's pathetic. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he would have accomplished so much more getting a date if he would have just been nice. You
Well, and here's the
thing: get a date if you're sweet. Not funny.
He's going to clear all of this up for us. Would you agree, Gary?
Probably, but but I just think I don't believe so much of what because remember that this is the kind of person that we're learning that's what I was saying earlier when you said you didn't want to get off track, is that he has aspects of himself that suggest a personality that is just fundamentally not grounded in morality. You're talking about, somebody that lied and connived and manipulated and broke into houses and stole and whatever, well before killing. I mean, there's something wrong with this person's moral compass. And when there's somebody with a moral compass like that, you don't believe anything they say. Chances are it's all lies.
Yeah.
But lies are still revealing.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really important. Drunk Turkey, hey, welcome to the interview room, brother. Appreciate you.
You know one another?
On a little trip. Yeah, he's got a great little show over on YouTube. Let's see here. Great show. Taylor mentioned in a hearing of a possible cleanup. Rowling used vinegar to try to destroy DNA. Do y'all think what BK was looking up on his tactics and mistakes others made? That is a great question. It's a great hypothesis that that questionnaire, those 16 questions that he asked, they were preparatory, in my opinion, to his muscle memory. He was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next? And so could he have peeled that piece off from the other individual that he was looking at? Remember, at that point when he's asking those questions, and that's in that survey, he's learning. And this is also another point that I'm glad you brought up, Drunk Turkey, is this idea of, okay, well, why is he learning from each of these offenders? And does he settle in on one?
Right.
And once he settles in, that muscle memory becomes, okay, now I got to play this out even further and become the character. I have to have a duality of personality and separate. And that's where Ted Bundy comes in my opinion. And that's where the house is a huge target. That's why he spends so much time at the house. That's why there's that. I've always felt that he could sit in the back of that place. And if you go look at my stuff when I was out there on Thanksgiving Day, I was fascinated with that backyard because I've talked to so many offenders that they will tell you right up front how it really went down. And lo and behold, that's exactly the way it went down. And so I was only applying some other things that we had learned. Okay. And some people don't naturally have split personality. Yeah, there is, there's a mental condition that's out of my lane. I'll let Gary talk about it. But then there's also others like this guy that build themselves into it. I mean, just go to Comic-Con.
But let's be
here. Go ahead, Gary.
Split personality, the idea that you could unconsciously have some other personality that's playing out, that is so rare as to almost be absurd to try to apply to a criminal case or whatever. What we're talking about is that a person can have a fragmentation of the self, that where there's just certain parts of themselves that are contradictory, that they could simultaneously have. Like, you could be a guy who goes to church in the day and grovels before God, and then goes home at night and drives around trolling for prostitutes to kill, like Gary Ridgway did, right? And that fragmentation is conscious, but it also involves a kind of strange ability to be sort of multiple things at the same time. But you're not unconscious of it. You're not like having a split personality, like you're like you have a dissociative disorder or something. You're just able to kind of do these things. And we see that in people who are traumatized. Some of these people are, but a lot of them are compartmentalizing more in that way BTK talked about, where you're cubing. You know to show this part to this person and this part to another person. And every once in a while, under enough pressure, that part will come out when it's not supposed to. You know what I'm saying? And that's a different thing. Now, one thing we have to say about the Bundy admiration that's very important. You got to put Bundy into cultural perspective. Bundy comes into the world view at a time that came just after the liberation of women in the Western world. And the idea is that there was an explosion of crime against women at that time, that some speculate, which we talk about in The New Evil, might have been a kind of a reaction by brittle, angry, insecure idiots that were mad that they were losing power over women, in a kind of acting out. Now, that is not by any stretch of the imagination intended to be a victim blaming as stupid. It just means that with certain brittle people, there was this sort of cultural acting out. And in the eyes of some people, Bundy is seen as a kind of anti-hero that throws all that out the window and goes out and just does what he wants and whatever. It's pathetic, but there is a kind of awful person that will look at Bundy and say that they admire that. See, women's rights be damned, whatever. And you get the sense of a guy, and now that's all sort of unraveling, who really thought that women ultimately should be subjugated, that they weren't supposed to be getting educated, that their job was to have great birthing hips, like he told that woman. Remember his interest in Margaret Atwood and the whole thing with the Handmaid's Tale and all that. So you get the sense of somebody who just doesn't like the equality of women.
And the date, you have birthing hips.
All right, with the birthing hips, exactly. So to me, I think he had an issue with that. But then there were these women, like I think his mom, Dr. Ramsland, Ann Taylor, or whatever, who are more mature, and they're not 20 years old. They're more mature. They've established themselves, so forth. And then they go to a different pocket in his mind, right? So there's like that kind, and then there's the sorority woman who doesn't want to have your children and isn't interested in you, and even though you think you could take them. And to that type, Bundy is sort of sexy and fascinating. And that's what I'm saying, is that that's the sickness of this kind of this kind of person, right? That imagine admiring somebody because you think they had that kind of power and didn't care about women's rights and all that. And that's you have to put it in that kind of perspective to really get it. And notice somebody just wrote and said, I sent an email from Rashad's book, page 118, that discusses the women's liberation. Well, that's interesting. I don't remember that being on page 118. Maybe you have a different edition, but I think that's fascinating. So I just want to point out that I think there was an admiration of Bundy because he saw Bundy as having the ability to kind of take what he wanted from the female population by force. And in the mind of Kohberger, that was like, now I know how to make it a science. Manipulate, take by force, get what you want, because they're not going to give it to you freely because you're a weirdo. Well, that's depressing, but I really think that misogyny is the heart of this. And I think this kind of toxic masculinity that seems to pervade so many of these offenders. And I mean, that's what it comes down to, is that somebody put the idea in Kohberger's head, apparently, that if a guy cannot get someone to date him that he was some kind of a loser in the game of life.
I wonder who that was.
Who knows? But I
Right.
think toxic masculinity, hatred of women, that's your central motive. And then it gets played out through this use of awful violent pee and whatever, because you have to think of a scientist who's fantasizing about how could I take what I want if I don't have the suaveness of Bundy. Well, Bundy was suave, but he also needed to bludgeon people. He also needed to break in when people were asleep sometimes. Maybe if I do that, I have a little Bundy to me, that kind of thing. And then we have this idea that Kohberger's mother had written that article, that letter or whatever, where she didn't like the idea of people celebrating the execution of Bundy. And you almost wonder if he felt that a woman that he did respect kind of could see the good in Bundy. Bundy's own mother saw the good in him. So it makes you wonder if the idea is, how do I take these two parts of myself and bridge them? Maybe I have a black heart that only a mother could love, that kind of thing. And I think that's why there's relief that the truth is out now. I think the story is out. The family is going to have to sit with it, whatever. But I think the idea is they're going to have to find a way to love their kid. And that idea that somebody could love you even though they see what you are is the whole heart of this for this guy. He couldn't find anybody who liked him as he was. See? And I really think that's what it comes down to. And it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And do you think this guy cared as he was sorting out his, smallest violin in the world playing for his sob story? Do you think he cared that he affected the lives of real human beings with futures ahead of them? And no, they were just pawns in his game. And that's the thing. So don't be surprised that he sat there and stared at them bug-eyed in the courtroom and didn't care. What did he care? Do you think if Kohberger had not been caught, he would have done this again?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. I agree. Not for 1 second do I doubt it. So, but I think in everything we're saying, let's let him unravel it, because even if he lies, he's still going to reveal it a little, because he's going to have an inability to hide that he gets worked up a little bit when you say certain buzzwords. And I think whoever interviews him, if they're clever, whoever ultimately interviews him, there are ways to get this guy to pop. But if you send some schmuck in there, he's going to eat them alive.
And have dessert simultaneously. Let's get back to some of the questions here. We've got like 16 questions here.
Oh boy, we have a big audience tonight, Chris.
Yeah,
people are here.
Yeah, there's 4,100 people here.
That's wonderful. I hope people are learning something. That's the only reason to care.
Okay, misogyny is the heart. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's a comment. Did they take those pings and match the dates up with the security camera on the one house? You would hope, Vet Girl, that was the case. I haven't seen, we haven't seen the meat and potatoes of those types of reports yet. All we have are the cover sheets, basically, is what I'm calling them. I've read every one of those things. I read them actually the very first day they came out. And I said, oh, they're just giving us the fluff. And right after that, they went on the fluff tour. And, they forgot to tell everybody, oh, yeah, by the way, there was a bunch of other stuff that we forgot to tell you about.
Well, don't you think, Chris, that everything that drips out basically supports everything we're saying?
Of course. And the public knows
it drips out. And I'm waiting for something.
Everybody in chat has been saying this. It's like, just tell us what is out there, because I think we're all concerned with what you just said, that he is going to have a lifetime of changing the narrative and saying it. All of that fantasy is going to start dumping itself. And then somebody's going to write, Gary, you have how many pieces of letters and art? Remember we did that one show?
Yeah. That was just a little drop of it. I have a lot of that stuff from people that have sent it to me to study, or from the defenders have sent.
Okay, I'm gonna be I'm going to Vegas here and I'm going to put $1,000 on Brucato that BK is going to send you something at some point. And it's going to be a letter.
Communicate with him at some point.
I'm just saying, that at some point, et cetera. Do you think BK is proud of what he did? Additionally, would it bother him for supporters of his saying he didn't do this, thus giving credit to someone else?
Yes. I think that Kohberger is the kind of guy who would have sat in a classroom listening to his professors talk about offenders and enjoyed the idea that he might one day be the one that people were talking about. And, you got to picture somebody who on the one hand is learning about it to help, and on the other hand is learning about it going, I could do that better. And, like, boy, should you be, should you feel fortunate that I haven't turned my powers to evil, that kind of thing. And, but obviously he did in the end. But I think that he was a creature of terrific envy. I think he envied even Bundy. I think he envied people that could just go up to somebody and see. See, Chris, the thing is this. For many years, I have done therapy with men and women, and I've learned a great deal about the secret innermost thoughts of people with regard to dating. Okay? And I know all the crazy fantasies that people can maintain in the world about what it takes to get a date. There's nothing funnier than these people who come and say, I got it all figured out. It's a science. Be super cocky, be condescending. People love it, whatever. And you're sitting there like, what a loser you are. Are you kidding me? The truth is, even if you're just kind of plain looking, if you are kind and you are stable and you are the one that somebody could come to and you're just sort of steady and you're there and you take interest in a person's life, a person will start to find you attractive. At the end of the day, attractiveness has a lot to do with a mixture of who you remind people of, how stable you are as an object, how predictable you are, how much you care about another individual, how intelligent you are, how sensitive, how deep, what your convictions are you different than the rest of the world? And on top of it, like, if you're cute, that's just like a cherry on top, okay? If you just stay the course and you're kind, you could get someone to love you. The problem with this guy is he had ideas like that. If someone didn't want you immediately at the pool party, that you had no chance unless, like you were going to walk up to somebody and they were going to think you were just fascinating, or you were going to have to take it by force or something like that. Nonsense. All I'm saying is, like, men need to learn in our culture that attractiveness is not all about this hyper masculine crap, because it winds up making them look like angry jerks that scare people. The other thing is there are people in the audience that are saying, like, should I be scared of men? Well, I think, Chris, you and I have a thing or two to say about this, but I do think that sometimes you have to take a little time to get to know who you're dealing with, because there are some people that are wolves in sheep's clothing, and that's true. Right?
Yeah. We used to tell our daughter men are like buses. And I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of that.
Roxana said there should be dating classes. That's true.
I know, right? I mean, Karen had a list when I first met Karen, and I guess I don't know if I hit all of it, but I hit enough of it to win her heart. But she said, she used to tell, the story of men are like buses, because one, when you go to the bus stop, you look up and you look at the schedule. And once you figure out, okay, here's the schedule, you look up and you see the bus coming. If it's got the right destination, then that's the first decision you get to make. And as the bus pulls up and the doors open, you start learning about all the crowd getting off of the bus. And you look at the bus driver and you say, oh, well, he's interesting. Okay. And the bus driver says, hey, I'm going to that destination. Do you want to go with me? Okay. Then you get an opportunity to say yes or no. Okay. But we used to tell our daughter, before you get on that bus, make sure you lift that baggage compartment and look in there, because that bus driver may be carrying a whole bunch of baggage. And if you see a cooler in there, with a little motor, and you lift it up and it's got duct tape wrapped all around it. Okay. And it's just loaded with all kinds of stuff that maybe you may or may not agree with. Okay. You probably don't want to get on that bus. Okay, because you don't know if it's going to actually get to that destination. So then you get to choose and step off. Okay. Because what Karen used to say, and she still says it, and I say it, men are broken. We are broken. Meaning you can't fix us. It's the way we are. Okay. It's what you see is what you get. Okay. You're not going to fix us. Okay. It won't happen. It's never happened in my lifetime. I mean, Karen will just look at me sometimes and go, no, it ain't working like that. Don't do that. Okay. And I mean, I love this girl more than anything on this earth. And she's right. Right. She's 1,000% right. And so, of course, to our daughter, that was very difficult for dates, because she'd and then I taught her about, asking the principle of tell me about your life versus tell me a little bit about you. Okay. And true story, Gary, I'm going to just cut this real fast, but she had a boyfriend that I pulled him aside and I said, so tell me a little bit about your life. And he looked at me like, Mr. McDonough. And I said, yeah, tell me about your life. He goes, you mean, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. You start. Okay. And the kid ends up telling me that his mom it just went on. And I was like, holy cow. Okay. You are not taking my daughter out. I don't care, goodbye, aloha. And, of course she was upset, but when I told her, hey, by the way, okay, this person just said A, B, C, and D. She was like, oh, thanks, Dad. I said, yeah, here we go. Okay. And so there you go. Men are like buses. That's, I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm going to answer this question, or you got to answer this question. Is there a possibility BK's mother groomed him?
I don't know anything about, just the superficial stuff. I think that there is definitely something to the story of his development that's going to be interesting, but I just will let it unravel. And believe me, we're going to hear it. It's just a matter of time. These stories always come out, but there's something, we're going to learn if there was or wasn't some contribution, or at least start to understand where he got certain ideas about women, or, it could have been that, for example, he came from a home in which he was seen one way, and then he went out in the world and realized that women saw him a different way. Who knows? We'll figure it out. But we don't know how the drugs altered him, that kind of thing. But I think that the central point I'm trying to make here, because it's a really important factor in this, is when you have people that are saying, well, maybe he just had violent pee on his phone, maybe whatever. When you do that, what you're doing is you're normalizing as if that's just what dudes do. They sit around and have hostile, misogynistic feelings about women and look at that kind of pee and live in a fantasy world. I don't think that we should accept that that's what the average guy is doing. But I do think that on a subtler level, our culture does put in, it does make men have stupid ideas about women, about equality, about the balance in life that could come from a healthy relationship with a woman, the softening of the self, not seeing it as a vulnerability that somebody loves you despite what you are instead of for what you are, realizing that a woman could bring to fruition parts of yourself and sensitivities in yourself that you're not comfortable with, and things like that. And when you get someone who lets that in, a man could be a wonderful creature. But when they develop resentment around it, boy, can they be awful. And when they get smug and think they have it down to a science, or think that because they happen to be somebody who's tomcatting around and getting a lot of attention from women, that they're going to stay that way forever. You ever see what happens to those guys when they get older? They're by themselves and they're all shriveled up, still wearing stupid gold chains with the shirt open. And there's nobody to push them around in the wheelchair and feed them tapioca. They don't understand that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, what do they think is going to happen to them? That they're going to tomcat till they're 80? Stupid.
The Mr. T starter kit.
Yeah, stupid. I mean, you know, settle down, be nice to somebody, get into. So, but it's very, very important, and that's why I almost think that there's something pathetic about that tomcat type, because they don't wind up with anybody. It's those ordinary Joes that wind up being a stable figure in somebody's life and having a normal relationship, and then there's somebody to love them. So yeah,
Tesla scooters.
it's dumb.
I love it.
The shirt open. You know what I'm talking about? You know that type that they think when they're 80, they're still, you know, they're still going after people that are 25. You know, get over yourself.
Eccentric. We do. We actually, yeah, thank you for feeling for us. Corey. That was very considerate for bringing that.
They think it's funny as the gold chain.
The gold chain.
Down here, the bypass scars are showing, and they've got the shirt open with the hair. I mean, you know, come on.
Yeah. The Tom Selleck, you know, haircut.
Stupid.
Your chest, $5.
Masculinity is like embarrassing, and I just think that's the world in which this guy was swimming. You know, it's like pathetic, and you know, so that's why I think there's this interesting question that comes up, like, did certain people fail in this situation? Did anybody not notice? Did somebody pull this guy aside and say, women don't want you to act like that? Stop. That's stupid. You know, that kind of thing. But where was he failed? You see what I mean?
Yeah. Will he tell us? Do you think he's going to tell us?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, somebody failed because he had wrong messages. Right. His messages were all messed up. You know what I'm saying? I mean, somebody along the way, you know, and then the other thing is, like, he was so busy trying to look perfect. I don't know. But then at the same time, this guy went on the internet and posted about all his troubles. There was a time when, despite all this mechanical stuff and whatever, there seemed to be a time when he was vulnerable to being alone and wanting support. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I know there's this desire to depict him like he was always a reptile, but it looks like he hardened, and there was a time when he was not fully baked into that evil, where there was a vulnerability, because he went online and was saying, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm seeing nothing. My feelings are all going away. I look in the mirror and I see meat. I'm a loser. Don't you see what I mean, Chris? There was a time when he was kind of hating himself. And remember the questionnaire that was developed to ask offenders questions? One of the things that Victor Petricka from Super Sleuths and the
Boston College,
the Boston College, I work with him in Ann Burgess, and he is in the foundation with us. One of the things he pointed out that I thought was very clever is that it was really interesting that in that questionnaire, he was asking about depression. All the questions look like they were about psychopaths and whatever, but then you're asking about sadness. Well, I think that's because he was feeling it. I do think at one point there was a whiff of something where somebody could have said, all of this feeling alone and feeling like you're out of control in the world, and the drug use and the stealing and your family probably having to run around and fix it for you and all of that, you know, and his grades weren't as good as they were later and all that. There must have been a time when somebody could have gotten in there and said, like, you need some help, you know? And, you know, I have had people that I've helped that have told me they've had outrageous fantasies and they didn't go on to do anything at all. I can't prove the help stopped them, but they say it did. You know what I'm saying? So I do think there was a time when there was a tiny window and it rapidly closed, and then that was the end of it. But I really think so, Chris, because I read what he wrote online and it was pathetic.
Yeah.
You remember it? All that stuff about the... So don't you think there was a little bit of like there was like a failure to see this guy was losing it?
Yeah, and I think he got to that place, to your point, where
was nothing left but evil.
Yeah, it was nothing there. So Lori says, I just Just
And I'm
as
not saying I feel sorry for him. Let me be clear.
no, we're not.
Because he chose the darkness.
But you know, the other side of that coin, quite frankly, this is how you approach. I think the world understands the only way you're going to be able to get these people, these like a Bryan Kohberger, you have to approach them with not empathy, but an understanding of how did you get here? How are we here? What is going on here? And so I just thought of what Lori says, just a thought of this. Do you think BK was in the house before the girls rented it for school, and that shows how he knew the layout? I have no idea.
No idea. But in some way, Chris, whether it was virtual or physical, he somehow seemed to have been in there before.
Yeah.
And I wish, as Ann Burgess pointed out, back when there was I think when there first was a suspect, she said they've got to do an inventory because something's probably missing. Because, now you remember what Ann said in the serial killer study, although some of the people in the serial killer study were like it was an assassin in there, and a mass murderer, I think, or whatever. But basically, they were serial killers. And one of the things she pointed out was that the number one thing they took as a trophy was ID cards, driver's licenses, things like that. For some reason, maybe it's because it's a symbol of power. Maybe it's because it's your identity, right? Who knows? But there's something about ID cards that is a favored object. And we know this guy had some.
Yeah, he had a bunch.
Right.
We know of two.
We know of two. You would think that this kind of personality, you'd expect to take something a little bit more sexualized, like underwear, a bra, something like that, or an object. Another really common thing is with the ones that live double lives where they have significant others, is they'll give, I've heard stories like this. You go to your wife and you say, I know I haven't been around a lot lately, because you've been out killing people, but the wife doesn't know it. Oh, I've been a little distractible, whatever. I brought you a gift here, and it's like a ring or a watch or something, and it's like an olive branch. And 10 years later, when the guy gets arrested for being a serial killer, you find out that what they gave you was the ring or the watch of a woman they killed. And the idea is that you want the woman to wear it in bed so that you could feel like they're the victim, because you're reliving the experience of the offender. I mean, this is what you're dealing with these people. Also, this guy had an obsessional quality. He would have kept stuff.
Yep.
And he was a collector, probably. So you'd expect that one way or another, we're going to find out something. I mean, you don't think on the way out the door he put something in his pocket?
Oh, well, he said, Bethany said, or excuse me, Dylan said he had something in his hands when he left. And even the authorities have said, yeah, he was carrying it like this. Okay, whatever
Like
that
this?
means. Yeah, like he had,
something.
like it was a bigger problem. And then I hypothesized that maybe it was a Kaylee flashlight or something like that, which, could be used as a bludgeoning type of problem. But, of course, that's just a hypothesis.
Although, am I correct, Chris, that I think I heard Steve Goncalves talk about it, that there were markings on Kaylee's mouth that suggest a very particular pattern to the bludgeon.
And the authorities have said that, and they've not been able to identify it, so they say. But the ME's office, it's probably the handle
of the K-bar.
Of the K-bar, and he's probably using the end of that K-bar as a bludgeoning device, because that's what it's designed to do. I mean, it's a war tool, and they're vicious. I mean, they have that knife in of itself, has a blood groove on it. I mean, people don't understand them. I looked at some of the pictures of the crime scene, and you could clearly see what I saw was 90-degree droppings, and that is typically off of the blade of the knife. And then there was one cast off near a door that they've released the picture, and it was obvious that he had that knife in his hand, and he went towards the door handle, and as he turned it, the knife, it shot off of the knife because you can see the trajectory of that knife. And then, of course, I looked at where one of the pictures where Ethan was, and he was killed right there next to the edge of the bed, next to the wall. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that, I'm not going to show those pictures for the record, everybody. Okay. I mean, there's no sense in doing that. I don't want to see them personally. I've seen enough in my time, and I still see it every single day at work. So I don't need to.
I haven't seen the crime scene photos, and I don't wish to. But Chris, you're saying something sort of without saying it that I think is important, which is that think of what it reveals about a motive, that the weapon you use is a weapon of war. The idea is that you would view the victim or the type of victim at the way a person would who was at war. This whole group is my enemy. If you've got the uniform, I could kill you without any compunction, because in my mind, this is justified war, right? You bombed Pearl Harbor, so if you've got that outfit on, of the Japanese army, you're my enemy, that kind of thing. And I think that that's precisely what it is, Chris. I think he saw himself at war with women.
Oh, no question. Yeah, no, that's a great point. That is a great point.
As a war weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and there are ways of figuring out all of those things. They sent the the victims up to Seattle, and up there they did what they needed to do. And I'm going to show just the audience one picture real fast, real quick. So
the person from earlier sent you a apology, Chris, in the chat.
Oh, no worries, no worries. This is Dr. Skip Sperber and myself.
Oh,
we were at the ME's office, and Skip said, "Do me a favor, cut the wall out and bring the wall to the ME's office." And in this particular case, you can see this indentation here on the wall. Well, this is the victim's head. And you can see the 2x4 here. The suspect, he basically grabbed her and he jammed her into the wall. And Skip, who did some of the bite work, believe it or not, he in the Bundy case, he was one of the forensic odontologists who were asked to give an opinion.
Field.
Well, yeah, and what we did is we matched the indentation to the victim. I mean, it was, of course, I'm not showing that photograph here, but you can see that this is if you get the right people at the right time involved in the right situation, you'd be surprised what you can do. And by the way, everybody can tell that the mustaches were optional back in the day. But I just wanted to show you that photograph. And also, here's another one that I think would be really interesting. Anybody know what this is? Gary does. Okay. It's Mount Rainier, right? And this is one of the areas where Ted was dropping his bodies. Okay. Well, I have it from a very reliable source. Okay. Guess whose house this came from? In Pennsylvania. So that said, on that piece of the puzzle, okay, thank you. Somebody else said it here too.
Did the Kohberger family spend time in Washington, or were there ties to that place?
I have no idea.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so let me pull up some more questions here, because we have. Thank you, everybody who have given us, all these super chats and stuff. You're so kind. We're so grateful, and thank you, Misty, for your kindness there. I want to thank. Seriously, I get so focused. I do apologize. I don't miss you on purpose. If I miss some of your questions and stuff, please forgive me. But I mean, there's just so much tonight that's come on.
I don't make it easy. I distract you, Chris.
No, you're fine. Michelle, you know what? I don't have the Cellebrite report yet. Michelle, if you can get it or anybody can get it, I'm telling you, that's going to be a treasure trove into the mind of BK. It will be a treasure trove. But now that they're talking, i.e. they've given interviews, it unfortunately just makes the authorities not look really good, because, you know, it just makes them look like, you know, well, they're out there saying, well, there's no connection. And now you have the connection of saying, well, wait a minute. He was actually at the Mad Greek. In fact, he was using their, you know, Wi-Fi at the restaurant.
That's why I think, Chris, my sense is more like they can't say for sure, so that they don't want to speculate. I think it's more like, if you're looking for cold, hard, black and white, like blinking lights, this is why it happened, they don't feel comfortable that they have evidence of that. And so, but the problem is that by commenting on it at all, it gives the implication that if it comes out that it's true, you've been on record saying that it isn't. I mean, literally, Chris, you have somebody that comes out and says there's no stalking, but the phone has been 23 times in the area of the house. You know, like, it just makes it looks weird. But I really think it has to do with, like, according to strict definitions, we cannot say this for sure. Leave it alone. You know, that kind of thing. So it's like not wanting to go out on a limb. But I think with our experience, what we're trying to say is, like, you know, that's usually what this means. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I love about you, Gary. You're always an optimist. Okay.
Right.
The investigator,
optimist, yes.
the investigator in me says,
I
is
know.
that an ice cream truck going by? Do you guys hear do you hear the bells of the ice cream truck? Reflect back when you were a kid. It's either Mr. Frosty or it's going to be that creepy guy that's got his own little ice cream, you know, business. Okay. Either way, it's an ice cream truck. And
Right.
if you can't tell the public that, guess what? I heard the bells of an ice cream truck. Okay. i.e., not to, you know, kick a dead horse, but I'm going to kick it. Okay. If you can't tell the public that, oh, by the way, okay, his phone joined the Wi-Fi at the restaurant where the two victims work.
Mm.
Okay, and you wait for the company that actually told you that his phone connected at the restaurant where the two victims work.
Yeah, right. I got it.
There's a problem in River City. And you know, I'm not going to wait for the band to come by and start playing the music and everybody go, wow, that looks like a band. Okay. I mean, the reality is reality. And they should have known that in the beginning. Okay. I've got a bunch of questions here for you, Gary. Go ahead.
Oh, boy.
Is it true? Okay. Jim asked, is it true that BK had no connection to the victims? Well,
You just addressed it.
answered that. Can BK be traced to any incel group? I don't know the second half, and I appreciate your question, but I think the Cellebrite report just clearly, you know, takes care of the first side of that. Sissy.
I would take the incel theory and go to the nearest trash can and toss it in and move on with life. That is not what happened. Misogyny and being an incel are not the same. That they are not the same. This guy had issues with women, and there were women that were attracted to him, but he had a disdain for those women or rejected them or something. That is different than being an incel. Take the incel thing and throw it out. And I also don't like the victim blaming implication to the incel theory. That if some woman had gone out with him, you know, he wouldn't have killed anybody. I mean, you know, I don't think so. No, not an incel. Just hated women.
Dr. B, could BK have coaxed Murphy, the dog, and entered the house in the 2 or 3 weeks before the murders and the kid. That's coming from the police report where the stranger in the backyard, Murphy was hanging out in the backyard and at some point would not come back when Kaylee was calling him, and the officers documented that. That's
Well,
where
I think that's a really interesting question, because you remember, Chris, if you go back and you watch our early episodes, one of the questions that was raised is, I mean, I think I asked you, or we talked about it just like on one of these episodes, but I said, I don't know why the dog wasn't going crazy. It doesn't make sense. Why wasn't he going nuts? Remember, and then we made the whole comparison to the dog that didn't bark in the night, you know, that kind of thing. And remember, we had that conversation. Well, one of the things I think we said was maybe he had met the dog before.
Mm-hmm.
And now one of the things that's coming out is this, that Kaylee, you know, might have had someone that was sort of watching from the bushes, right, or from the forest.
Right.
And the dog would run out. And there's this question of like, was somebody giving the dog a treat, petting it, getting it used to him?
Mm-hmm.
But think about it, you know, if that's true, I mean, wow.
Well, and the dog was in
and all
her room. There's that sad picture of Murphy underneath her desk when the cops got there, and they even took a picture of it with the pup still in there. And what's interesting about that, again, it goes back to this idea that everything, when you're working a homicide case, you just don't know what pieces of the puzzle are going to connect and what pieces of the puzzle you just put back in the box initially. And when you have situations like that where the first red flag is she's telling her girlfriends. That is the very first, when I would interview, you know, friends of friends, the first thing they would tell you is, well, you know, she said A, B, C, and D. And man, those are the kind that come right to the top quickly, because they're intimate type of conversations. And though you got to pay attention to those fast. You got to pay attention to other situations. And they did in one of them where they went back and they investigated, you know, a burglary where the suspect had a knife and was wearing a mask, et cetera. And they interviewed those women, and all those reports are in there. Okay. But then you have the dog situation with Murphy, or excuse me, with Buddy, the dog that was, you know, skinned. Then
Right.
you have the car situation where, you know, the woman's undergarments are found in the door. You know, those are all red flags. Those are huge red flags.
They're interesting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And
And
until
they
you
were all dismissed.
Yeah, that Murphy's case was just released, or excuse me, Buddy's case was just released, and I did a thing on that. And now we understand why. Because some of the things that are starting to trickle out now, okay, seems to be the MO of the communication to the public. They've been trying to hold the narrative so close to the chest that they're not realizing that they're holding it too close, and that the mainstream media, YouTube, the social media, it's a whole new world today. It's like they're buying vinyl records and not realizing that digital exists. Okay. Well, let's just sell them vinyl records and tell everybody that, well, now here's a better idea. The University of Idaho is selling 8 tracks. Okay. Those of you know. Okay. They're selling you 8-track players, and they're trying to install it in your car as if you're going to, you know, buy it. Okay. So, you know, when the feds came in, you know, they said, hey, well, wait a minute, why are you selling 8-tracks? Let's go ahead and handle this a little bit different. So let's see here. Has anyone been able to read his master's thesis? It was titled Script. Gary, have you been able to read it?
No.
I have not either. Thank you, Vet Girl, as always, and thank you for your service.
But I look forward to it because this guy was so obsessional that you can imagine certain themes being present in a lot of what he. I'm sorry to Gail Anderson that you think this is a lot of BS. I do not believe it is. I support what Chris is saying. And sometimes people say things in the comments that amaze me.
I didn't even know that. Oh, okay.
I don't think it's a lot of BS.
Okay.
Between the two of us, Chris, we have like 60 years of experience.
That's okay, Gail.
Well,
No, if
okay.
if that's your real name, we appreciate you.
Bye. Hasta so long.
Okay, so I gotta keep moving here because we got people. We're almost we're 3 hours into this, Gary. Do you realize when we get yapping here, there's no stopping us? I love it.
No, but I think it's important.
It's important, of course, for the families
to talk
too.
About this stuff, yeah.
When I was a child, my mother, siblings, and I were staying with a male friend of hers. My sibling and I were playing. Whoops, where'd Gary go? He'll jump back in. And found a box full of women's IDs in a closet. The guy was weird. I often wondered about that situation. Gary's back.
Don't know what just happened, but
no, that's Missy stayed. She had this weirdo that stayed with her mom for a little bit, and she found a box of IDs, and often felt it was weird, and wondered if he was a serial. I hope you got out of that house fast, girl, because that would have freaked me out. That's for sure. And to think, it had an impact on you because you're still talking about it today, right? So yeah, who knows? That's really, that was really creepy. Thank you for sharing that. Really do appreciate it. Please address the mother issues. Is she to blame?
We don't know enough information. I think to get into any kind of deep speculation is goofy, but I do think that when you have somebody who has these kind of split ideas about women, you always want to think about who the prototypes are in their life for those ideas. I just think we have to wait until more information comes out. We have no idea. But it'll be interesting. But I wanted to say something quickly. I realized that the person had asked about the thesis. I think I read something about that he was interested in script theory. I think that's what the person's talking about. And that's this whole idea that, like, on a cognitive level, if you're in a situation and you have a particular goal, and then like the circumstances don't allow you to have that goal, you will sort of settle for the next thing in the hierarchy, as I understand it. And what's interesting about that is that there is a little bit of that in the crime. This idea that he might have had a particular plan and it didn't go as planned, but then might have found another way to sort of satisfy the same psychosexual goal. And so it's interesting to think about that. But it could just be a coincidence. I mean, it would take a very specific kind of mind to be interested in applying that to crime, that way of thinking. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So, but we'll see. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to let the jury come out on what he was studying and all that. And, also the people in his place of education, they're sort of not saying much. And they're, I saw Dr. Ramsland come on TV and talk about how there's FERPA protecting records and whatever. I want, once this stuff comes out, to see how there was this kind of gestating series of interests that culminated in the particular way he played his crime out. And I think we're going to see that there are glimmers of what ultimately happened and what fascinated him and how he thought about what offenders do when they're in the room, and how you sort of, whatever arises, you have a plan B, that kind of thing. And it's going to be really interesting to see. But so what's the next question? Was the animal hair found at BK's Washington apartment sent for analysis? I can't imagine it wasn't, Chris, but I never heard anything about it.
Well, we haven't seen that report yet. Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely great question. I want to get to this one here. Vet Girl, study on social media 2127, how it may be feeding these monsters 2527 seems to be the age in a lot of these guys lately, generation social blew up. But you have the data on the average age. You got 119 years worth of data. What's it tell us about the average age?
The average age for mass murder is in the mid 30s. And what's interesting about that is that suggests it's not related to serious mental illness, which tends to erupt younger in life, right? It seems to be more related to life circumstances, things going haywire when you've established yourself. But in serial killers, it tends to be like 27, like around there. And his age is more consistent with the average age of first kill in a serial killer. I'm convinced that he is one of those 11.78% of people whose mass murder is simply the entree into serial killing. Incidentally, I saw that the news is pulling the BTK thing out of mothballs, and we're back to talking about whether he was impersonating BTK. I thought that story had died. I wish it would already. The reason for that story, of course, is because the teacher, one of the teachers of Kohberger, Dr. Ramsland, is like the authority on BTK. So it feeds into that whole narrative of, learning from your teacher and then wanting to be more interesting than the person who was of great focus to your professor. I think that narrative is goofy. We have no evidence of him looking up BTK once. Was BTK anywhere on the phone? I mean, even one time? Not that I'm aware of. I think that's...
And Dennis wasn't into any of that. I mean, even his first kill with the Otero family, remember, and by the way, just for the record for everybody, the Cold Case Foundation, we studied that case years. And when they finally caught him, we were actually asked to opine before they arrested Dennis Rader. The Cold Case Foundation was. And so I have that whole case on my computer right in front of me because we were teaching it to cops at the time. And the one thing about the differences there, remember, the MO is like totally different, completely. I mean, Rader was very meticulous. He had his kill kit. He had his fantasy played out before it ever happened. He used to draw it out before any of that. And we're not seeing any of that in any way, shape, or form with BK here.
And he would have, if he had an opportunity to pull a BTK in the courtroom and get up and boastfully tell the story and so forth. Yeah. But there's no indication of it. That is people who have no real understanding of crime, who think that criminals think like the cheesy characters on CSI shows and are motivated by things like, I'm going to be more interesting than the killer that my teacher studies or whatever. Life is not that. That is the kind of nonsense you come up with when you've never met an actual offender.
And let's,
a goofy storyline.
Let's also remember that Dennis Rader was a pedophile. His first victim outside of the mother was Josephine, who was 14. Okay. Bryan Kohberger, whether you like him or not, is not a pedophile. Number one. He's not targeting children. Remember, he kills the entire family, the Otero family, including the son, okay, to get to the little girl. And he takes her down in the basement and he does what he does, okay? And then the second situation after that, okay, he shifts his victimology into more mature situations. And he tells you very clearly, because he started to evolve. Okay. He kills the mother on the bed, but she is dressed. Mrs. Otero was dressed when he kills her on the bed. And he lays her on the bed, binds her. He wraps a bag over her head. He strangles her. But Josephine is found in the basement, naked from the waist down. Okay. She's wearing a top. It's a blue top because I have the photographs and I've studied that case for years. Okay. And have taught about
semen, and there's semen.
Yeah, exactly. There is. And it's horrific. Okay. To compare that to this guy is an insult to the Otero family and any of the other victims that Dennis Rader took out in this world. It's an insult to the families of the victims of the Bryan Kohberger homicides because it's a grift at that point to try to correlate those two together. Okay. And then to feel that one would need to relate to it in any way, shape, or form. Okay. There is no relating to the Steve and Christy and other family members in any way, shape, or form. If you were to take the family members, and by the way, there are family members still alive. Remember the brother that was shot?
Yeah.
And escaped. Okay. To think about the damage that's being done to that person who's still there, who's still alive. Okay. That by even comparative analysis, it's ridiculous. Okay. So I want to move on because there's just a couple more.
I think it's wonderful, Chris, that we generated so much interest, that people have so many great questions, and, with the exception of a couple of, kind of people that popped in that said weird things, we have a wonderful audience with really intelligent questions that clearly intimately know the case, who really are victim focused, who I think it's really great. So have you noticed the change in his face over the last 3-ish years? What was the rest of the question?
BTK has where's he saying this? Where is he saying it? Because Dr. Ramsland talks to him weekly, and he's denied anything, even close to it. The killer himself has said, What are you guys talking about out there? That's ridiculous." Okay, so that's how powerful social media can be, and I would just ask that we be a little more responsible to the victims in this particular situation.
Right.
So, okay, so let's go to this question. Have you noticed a change in his face over the last 3 years? It's like he had finally let the monster out and he can be who he really is. Great observation. That's good.
I mean, look, 3 years in the jug is going to affect you, whether you think you're in control or not. Did we finally get clarification from Eve?
No,
earlier,
but
I was referencing if he felt empty, numb, or without meaning, he may commit an act to create a sense of purpose or feel alive. Okay, I've seen that kind of thing with even with the mass murder, the idea of battling, or psychopaths, the dealing with the deadness, the trying to create a narrative, a sense of purpose, and all that. I've seen that kind of thing. The act becomes the purpose with the motive center to escape inner emptiness. Yeah, that sometimes is a motive, but when we did the mass murder database, we found this kind of thing to be extremely rare. For serial killers, the primary motivation is the fulfillment of psychosexual fantasy, to level the playing field for past hurts with surrogate victims. With mass murder, the primary motivation is you can't cope with some life event that has taken something from you that has given your life a purpose. That's pretty much those are the prime motives. But this thing of like killing out of ennui, whatever. Yes, there is a modern new evil kind of quality to that, absolutely, but it's not very common. Killing out of boredom. I've seen cases like that though. Like when I think it was Ed Kemper. They said, why did you kill? And he said, well, I wanted to see what it would feel like to kill grandma. I'm pretty sure that was. And then why'd you kill grandpa? Well, I didn't want grandpa to have to be without grandma. that kind of thing. It's like curiosity in and of itself, or boredom. But I do think that this guy was the type that would have experimented. If he were given an opportunity, he would have tried to try to intellectually, to seek stimulation and all that. Absolutely. But I don't think that was the primary motive. I think it was more like he had a puzzle in his mind, like, how do I get a woman to pay attention to me? And it was obsessing him and bothering him and making him angry and frustrated and, that kind of thing. But there's an intellectual component to it, certainly. Let's see. Do you see any serial killers that start in their teens? Yes. We mentioned Kemper.
Yep. Okay, Gary, I've had you 3 hours, 20 minutes. This is a very long show, folks. I got to get up.
It's been great, though.
Thank you. Oh, it's been fantastic. We just want you guys to know how much we appreciate you, and how much, you mean to this channel. We're grateful. Please share this out. We know this has been a long night, but it has been great. And do I think that Gary is a genius? Yeah, I do.
Okay. Maybe I'll learn to tie my shoes or something.
I know. Love listening to Dr. B. Absolutely. Me too. And he is amazing, but you are amazing. The audience is what makes this channel what it is. We can bring you great quality guests like Dr. G, but make sure you go get his book, The New Evil. The link is below. If you're not familiar with it, it's in the thing there. And we're also going to link the story of the Independent, what's the name of that magazine?
I see Josh is in the audience, and Josh, I agree with you. It's relative.
Yeah, if Josh here. Okay, so again, there he is. There he is.
It's relative.
Exactly. And if you haven't subscribed over at the lab, get over to the lab.
I think I'm dumb as a bag of hammers, but if you feel that way, thank you. I appreciate that. But it all, at the end of the day, I mean, it's all about what fruit do you have, to show. You know what I'm saying? And it's if you think anything that's come out of this has helped anybody, then define it how you will. I couldn't care less. I'm just here to try to help people understand this stuff. That's my only real reason for doing it. I don't get anything for doing this. I just think it's just because I want to kind of up the discourse with people that actually have a background in this stuff, instead of talking out of an armchair, or their rear end. Also, Josh, hello to you. I'm sure I'll be on the lab sometime soon. Maybe we both will, Chris.
Yep.
But I always love appearing on the lab.
Okay, let's remember the people in Hawaii for the Maui fires. They're still suffering. The people in Texas and Mystic, they're still suffering. There's been so many crazy shootings going on around the country. I don't know, we just need to really pay attention to, our friends and our neighbors, and take care of one another. So
Definitely.
we're going to blast off to Hawaii. Aloha, everybody. Mahalo. Biaka mai, as they say in Hawaii, meaning pay attention. And as Maui says, good night, everyone. See you on the next one. Thank you, Gary. We sure appreciate you.
Okay. Bye.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. with you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii.
Suspect there now, 4730 Crystal Springs Drive, in the parking lot above the merry-go-round. 2 males, no further description, adding striping to a black Cadillac four-door, possibly exchanging plates, vehicle license Utah 2904, in California, Paul William North 011, code 2 incident 3196.
Wilshire unit division on 11 in progress, 1818 Southwest Marlin Boulevard, 1818 Southwest Marlin Boulevard.
1507, all units, 1507 is following a country summer vehicle, 770 Regal 2-door. He is on the southbound Harbor Freeway from the Hollywood Freeway. It is a 2-door Buick Regal, 227 Tom Stephen Paul has Southwest units, all units, citizen reports, officer needs help, 3742 West Martin Luther King Boulevard. Citizen reports, officer needs help, 3742 West Martin Luther King Boulevard. Code 3 incident 3142. 11-day with Hollywood, New Hollywood available domestic violence. 5139 Fountain Avenue, code 2, RD 669, apartment 8, incident 227. Negotiated, City Negotiated, 211 TIR occurred 3921 Wilshire Boulevard. Vehicle incident 84. Thunderbird Light, also license 1 Lincoln Saber John 415, 1 Lincoln Saber John 415. Direct down 5 to 10 minutes ago, 2 male Caucasian 20 to 25 years, both head guns, 1 white pants and black shirt. 339 Wilshire has been identified. 845, possible code Tom, Ethan Alvarado.